Chapter 61. Tips. A Death Eater has an intelligence source in the Order of the Phoenix? Who is it? Dumbledore, having heard Snape's words, finally confirmed some things and continued to question Snape. I don't know, it could be anyone. They can't be exposed like this anymore. The Dark Lord will always find an opportunity. Maybe next time, or the time after that, he'll succeed. I know he won't give up. Snape's voice trembled, but he still told Dumbledore everything he knew. Immediately afterwards, Snape seemed to have made some determination, and the scales in his heart tipped irrevocably to the other side. He pleaded with Dumbledore, "Hide her, hide them all, I beg you." "And what are you prepared to offer in exchange, Snape?" Dumbledore looked at Snape with calm eyes and said softly. Having made his decision, Snape's face changed from the previous struggle to a slightly dazed expression, and then he said softly, "Anything." Seeing that Snape had finally made up his mind, Dumbledore felt a weight lift from his heart. He nodded and said softly, "Remember your words today. I will find a way to protect Lily and her family. If there are any movements on Tom's side, remember to notify me. You know how to find me." Snape now seemed to be drained of all strength, nodding numbly, and then said, "The Anduin you just mentioned, is that the bastard who saved Sirius Black that day?" Dumbledore nodded and said, "Indeed, and he was also sorted into Slytherin, but his position is much firmer than yours." "A Slytherin? Well, maybe my initial choice was wrong. Help me give this to him, consider it my thank you gift." With that, Snape took out a bottle of potion from his and handed it to Dumbledore. "It seems you're not entirely beyond redemption. Perhaps one day you can express your gratitude to him face to face." Dumbledore, seeing the change in Snape's position, finally showed a hint of a smile and accepted the crystal bottle Snape handed over. And Anduin, whom they were talking about, had already fallen into a deep sleep. The next day, James took Anduin to retrieve his luggage from Sirius House. With the undetectable extension charm, Anduin could now carry all his belongings with him. James was shocked by the changes in Sirius House. He knew Sirius House was a mess, and now seeing the clean and tidy house, he could hardly believe his eyes. "So, you're saying you helped clean up Black's place? That's really amazing." James repeatedly refreshed his impression of Anduin. Anduin didn't think it was a big deal. Then, he and James went to St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries to visit Sirius. That guy was never idle, and he wouldn't stay in bed obediently. If James and Anduin hadn't visited, he wouldn't even have stayed in the hospital room. Seeing that this guy still had the energy to jump around, James and Anduin were relieved. After saying goodbye to Sirius, they returned to the Potter's residence before lunch. "Anduin, during the time you're staying here, if you need any help, just tell us. After all, you've helped us so much." During lunch, Lily looked at Anduin, who was teasing little Harry, and said with a smile. James nodded in agreement. Hearing Lily say this, he felt a little embarrassed. He smiled and said, "I'm already very satisfied with all the care you've given me. There's no need to be so polite." Seeing Anduin say this, Lily felt even more guilty. After thinking for a while, she said, "Right, aren't you very interested in the amulet and protective magic I gave you? I can teach you as much as possible during this time. You can also freely browse the Potter family's library. I think you can find what you want there." Upon hearing Lily say this, Anduin was overjoyed and said with a beaming smile, "Really? That's great. Professor Flitwick has always told me that you are his most proud disciple. I happen to have many questions I want to ask you." Seeing Anduin so eager to learn, Lily couldn't help but think of her student days. Muggle-born, diligent, and a strong desire for knowledge, Anduin's qualities were very similar to her own. Looking at Anduin's black eyes and black hair, as well as his Slytherin background, she was reminded of another former close friend. Lily was lost in memories for a moment. At this moment, Harry's untimely cry interrupted Lily's thoughts. She looked at little Harry, and a strong sense of love reappeared in her eyes. After lunch, after putting Harry to sleep, Lily took Anduin back to the underground safe house where they had fought before. It had been cleaned up, most of the clutter had been removed, and the empty room made it a suitable practice classroom. After standing in the room, Lily said to Anduin, "I've seen your levitation charm and severing charm before, and they were used very wonderfully. You must have spent a lot of time practicing the spells. If you want to practice spells, you can do it here. I can also be your sparring partner, and you can ask me any questions, as long as I can help you answer them." Hearing Lily say this, Anjuin didn't stand on ceremony. After thinking about his spell learning during this time, he said, "I've recently found that some spells are difficult to master when practicing them, such as the shield charm. Either the spell isn't successful, or the shield charm cast isn't strong enough, and it's not even as good as the barrier charm I learned before. What's going on?" "What? You've already started practicing the shield charm? That's not a spell you can master at your age. Even many aurors who have just joined the Ministry of Magic can't necessarily use this spell proficiently." Hearing Anjuin throw out such a difficult question at the beginning, Lily couldn't help but look at Anjuin in a new light. It should be known that her magical attainments are also not small, but she gradually mastered the shield charm after her 5th year. Other students may not be able to successfully cast it once even after graduation. So, is it a problem with the difficulty of this spell? "But I don't think its incantation is complicated," Anjuin asked puzzledly. In fact, not only the shield charm, but also the undetectable extension charm, patroness charm, disillusionment charm, etc., he had difficulty casting successfully in one go, but he confirmed that there was no problem with the spells he chanted. Hearing Anjuin say this, Lily knew that he must have a certain understanding of the shield charm, so she said, "Like this, you use the shield charm once, and I'll see where the problem is." Chapter 62. Anjuin nodded, then raised his wand and called out, "Protego." As Anjuin chanted, the magic within him surged. A shield-shaped barrier formed at the tip of his wand, but it looked weak and could not solidify. After a few breaths, it dissipated like a bubble. Lily was surprised that Anjuin could actually cast the shield charm, albeit barely. It seemed her little junior had very precise control over his magic. She remembered that when she first started using the shield charm, nothing happened at all when she recited the incantation. Lily then had Anjuin repeat the shield charm several times. Anjuin did as he was told, but the shield charms either flickered a few times and disappeared, or were as soft and weak as his first attempt. However, Lily quickly found the crux of the problem and said to Anjuin, "I think I understand. There's nothing wrong with your incantation, and your magic control is perfect, but it's still difficult to cast successfully in your current state. But this is actually normal." Anjuin tilted his head in confusion. The incantation was fine, but he still couldn't cast successfully? Was it really normal? Was it related to his condition? Lily didn't let Anjuin think for too long before explaining, "Like this, I'll give you an example and you'll understand. You're Muggle-born, so you should know about water pipes and valves. Usually, when we cast spells, reciting the incantation is like opening a valve in our body, and our magic is like water flowing out along an invisible pipe. This pipe isn't as hard as iron, but like a living, flexible hose. Our control over magic allows this pipe to lead to the correct place, preventing the water from flowing astray. If the control is strong, we can even control the flow rate and density. If our control over magic is insufficient, we can't control the flow. The more powerful the magic, the more rapid the flow, and the harder it is to control. But this isn't your problem, your control over magic is astonishing." Lily paused, then continued, "But besides controlling the magic, there's another important factor that determines whether a spell is successfully cast, whether your pipe is thick enough. Even if a thin pipe is full of water, the outflow is still small. That's your situation. The shield charm is a very energy-intensive defensive spell that can withstand most jinxes and dark magic, including the unforgivable curses. To cast a shield charm of sufficient strength, you must not only control the magic well, but also ensure that enough magic is injected." As soon as Anjuin heard Lily's analogy, he immediately understood. In other words, the magic output per unit of time wasn't enough to support him using such a powerful spell. Then he asked in confusion, "Then how can I make my pipe big enough, or rather, how can I output enough magic?" Lily smiled when she heard Anjuin's question and said, "It seems you still don't fully understand. The so-called pipe is your body. You're young, and your body hasn't fully developed, so it's naturally difficult to cast powerful spells. As you get older and your physique strengthens, casting spells with your current control will be very simple. Besides making the pipe in your body thicker, you can also make the water flow faster, so that enough magic is injected to support your casting. But I don't recommend you do that. Your inability to cast successfully is your body's warning. If you forcefully accelerate the injection of magic, it will be very bad for your body. If your physique isn't good enough, the pipe may rupture, causing damage to your body. I see, Anjuin understood. So, he couldn't cast because he was still young. And according to Lily, if he wanted to output enough magic per unit of time, one way was to wait for his body to grow, so that his body could circulate more magic at once. The other method was to pressurize, like a water pump pressurizing water, causing the magic to flow out rapidly, but the consequence might be excessive pressure, and then his body couldn't withstand it and exploded. At the same time, he recalled the Sectum Sempra curse. The power of this curse was not weak, but it wasn't difficult for him to cast. It seemed that this curse didn't have exaggerated requirements for magic. This made him once again raise the danger level of the Sectum Sempra curse in his heart. It was powerful and the casting standards weren't high, making it even more dangerous than forbidden curses. As for forcibly practicing the shield charm, he wouldn't rashly try such a high-risk thing. He didn't want to die. Even getting injured was unacceptable. It seemed that he couldn't practice these spells that required a lot of magic support in the short term. However, since magic output was related to physique, exercise, and eating more foods that enhance physique should be effective. Anjuin finished calculating. It seemed that his long-term persistence in exercising and cultivating was still very necessary. And he had to mooch off Hagrid for foods that enhance physique. He had eaten a lot of meat from magical creatures before, and even tried dragon liver, which did enhance his physique. Continuing like this, he should be able to successfully cast these spells before long. Since he couldn't practice these spells that required strong magic for the time being, he could only change direction. Anjuin prepared to start with ancient runes, study some rune theories, and learn to make alchemical items. At the same time, during magic practice, Anjuin prepared to start learning occlumency and legilimency. It was said that Salazar Slytherin, the founder of Slytherin, was a master of legilimency, and many famous legilimens were also from Slytherin. He wondered if this pattern would be effective for Anjuin. After thinking about it, Anjuin explained to Lily that he wanted to study runes and wanted to learn from her how to make alchemical items. I'm relieved to see that you are not preparing to stubbornly practice the shield charm. That's a very risky attempt. But I'm not particularly good at ancient runes and alchemy. I can only teach you what I know. Actually, if you're interested in alchemy, you can learn from Professor Dumbledore. I remember Mr. Edgar Bones also has great attainments in alchemy, Lily said to Anjuin in a gentle tone. I don't think you need to be modest. I think that amulet is very practical. I'd be satisfied if I could learn to make magical items like that amulet. Anjuin didn't think Lily's level was as bad as she said. In the research materials and textbooks that Anjuin had seen Lily leave behind, he could clearly feel that she was very knowledgeable, at least in terms of runology. Chapter 63. All right, then we'll have to find another place. Looks like the space I set up won't work. Lily shrugged. The two quickly moved to the study. Lily wasn't sure how much Anjuin knew about runology, so she asked him, runes, or rather, magical runes, are mainly composed of ancient runes. How much do you know about this? Anjuin had read some books on ancient runes before, so he honestly replied, I've read a simple introduction to ancient runes, and I have a runic dictionary and a table of magical phonetics. I can barely recognize all these characters. Right now, if I refer to the dictionary, I can do some simple translations, but I'm still completely clueless about how to combine ancient runes into runes. Anjuin, your diligence and erudition are always so surprising. You know more than most third-year students. In that case, what's your understanding of runes and runology? Lily looked at Anjuin with considerable surprise. Ancient runes was an elective in the third year, and someone already knew so much about it in less than a year after entering school. Anjuin recalled what he had seen in books and added his own understanding, saying to Lily, as far as I know, ancient runes are magical characters, so they are also called magical runes. It is said that the runic characters currently existing in the magical world were learned from the bones of some magical creatures. Some scholars believe that this is a script created by a god. After years of learning and research, wizards have gradually mastered their respective meanings and functions. In the course of history, many runes have been lost or become extinct. Runes are formed by combining ancient runes in a certain way, and runes have more specific and powerful magical abilities. In my understanding, if ancient runes are like letters, then runes are like words. If ancient runes are words, then runes are phrases or short sentences. After listening to Anjuin's explanation, Lily's eyes lit up, and she nodded and said, it seems that your understanding of runology is quite profound. That's right, most runes are composed of runes, and many spells are translated from single or multiple combinations of runes into incantations. Anjuin nodded to show that he understood. He also learned about this in Professor Flitwick's Charms Club, and Quirrell, a senior in the club, even tried to invent a spell called Amplifying Charm, which was constantly combining and modifying runes and then translating them into spells. Lily nodded and continued, "That's right. If you want to study runes, you must first master and learn ancient runes, and times are also developing. Many new runic characters have been discovered, or some lost characters have been restored by archaeologists." This was the first time Anjuin had heard of new characters being discovered, so he listened attentively. And Lily was very happy to see Anjuin's focused expression. After all, teachers always like students who love to learn, and she continued, "Similarly, many spells or runes have been passed down, but the runes that make them up have been lost. Many scholars are also working on restoration. Mr. Edgar Bones, whom you know, is a leader in this field. He once restored a new character from the ice-making charm. That character has the meaning of loss, and he also developed several different rune combinations." Oh? Anjuin had never heard of this before. He didn't expect that the bearded uncle he had met before had this ability. Lily continued, "The study of rune combinations and the study of mutual combinations between runes are even more profound. Many runes themselves contain multiple meanings, just like this character." Lily drew a character on a piece of parchment and then explained, "This character itself has the meaning of fly, but it also has the meaning of leave and go. It is also one of the characters that make up the levitation charm." Anjuin nodded and kept this character in mind. If you combine it differently, you can form the summoning charm or the banishing charm. The Muggle repelling charm also has this character in its rune combination. This is a very practical character, Lily patiently explained to Anjuin. In the runes or rune combinations that make up many spells and alchemical items, we usually have to determine a core character first, which we generally call the underlying character, and then combine other runes on the core character. The combination of magical runes is not like writing, with restrictions from left to right. The combination of runes is varied. Some form a circle, some form a rectangle, some even overlap, and many characters themselves are three-dimensional and require three-dimensional combination. At this time, we need to use a tool for studying runes, which is the Rune Workbench. Rune Workbench. Anjuin had never thought that there were so many tricks in this. To study it in depth, he even had to use professional tools? That's right, now I'll show you. Lily said, took out her wand, and tapped lightly in the air. A cabinet-like piece of furniture in the study opened left and right, and a workbench decorated with exquisite hollow patterns protruded from it. It looked like a beautifully carved art table, but the complex structure proved that it was definitely not that simple. Then, Lily took Anjuin to sit in front of the workbench. When he took a closer look, Anjuin realized that the tabletop of this workbench was not flat. The hole was slightly concave, and there were many hollowed-out places on it. He could faintly see a faint magical halo. Needless to say, this table could not be used for writing. Next, I will demonstrate it to you. This is a very complete workbench with the functions of recording, embodying, combining, and testing. We can record some runic characters, including three-dimensional characters, and embodying can call out the recorded characters, like this. Lily said a sound, and then a runic character appeared on the workbench. It was the fly character that Lily had just shown. Anjuin couldn't help but marvel at the magic, not only for the workbench, but also for the complex knowledge in runology, which greatly broadened Anjuin's horizons. Then we can try to do some combinations. Then Lily called out several characters and skillfully combined them together. It looked like a relatively simple combination, completely composed of planes, without forming a three-dimensional combination. Chapter 64. This is the rune combination for the levitation charm, and now we'll test it. Lily tapped the rune with her wand, and the rune, composed of several runic characters, lit up. Then, she channeled a stream of magic through her wand, passing it through the rune and towards a quill. The quill then floated up. Anjuin could clearly sense that Lily wasn't using the levitation charm, it was merely the magic passing through the rune and then acting on the quill that produced the effect of the levitation charm. Anjuin was amazed. This was much more intuitive than learning runes from a book. But that wasn't all. Lily continued, many spells and rune effects are very dangerous, or can't be tested directly on the workbench. Some skilled wizards can conjure runes through silent casting and then test them. But ultimately, there aren't many wizards who can master silent spells. So, what if you can't cast silently? Lily took something that looked like a small crystal ball from the side of the workbench and brought it close to the rune. The rune was then sucked into the crystal ball with a whoosh. Anjuin noticed that there were 2 whole rows of crystal balls on the side of the workbench. At first, Anjuin thought they were decorations, but he didn't expect them to be used to store runes. Like this, by preserving the runes, we can test them in other places. Lily explained the use of the rune workbench to Anjuin with a smile. Anjuin's eyes were opened, and he couldn't help but develop a strong interest in rune research. You can borrow this workbench for the next few days you are staying here. There are many characters recorded in it. You can study them by referring to the runic dictionary. I will also explain some common rune combinations to you, including the protective and reactive runes in my amulet. Lily saw the light in Anjuin's eyes and knew he liked the workbench, so she said to Anjuin. Anjuin was overjoyed and excitedly said to Lily, "Really? Thank you so much." Lily nodded with a smile. Next, she explained to him how to use the rune workbench to work, and Anjuin also had a great time playing with it. During this time, the Christmas gifts his friends had sent him also arrived. Because Anjuin had changed his residence, the gifts arrived a little late. Although Vivian verbally condemned Anjuin's behavior of directly asking for gifts, she still thoughtfully sent him a set of collection of magical glyphs. Charles sent Anjuin a poster of Ludo Bagman and stated in the greeting card that he was very happy to receive the mahjong tiles. His family had basically been taught how to play mahjong in the past few days, and he also sent out his beloved poster. Ludo Bagman was the star beater of the Wimborne Wasps team and Charles's idol, but Anjuin could only say that he appreciated the gift. Professor McGonagall sent Anjuin a scarf, said to be Professor McGonagall's favorite Appleby Arrows team scarf. The scarf was light blue overall, with a silver arrow embroidered on each side. Anjuin no longer had any expectations for what special gifts Quidditch fans would send. Anjuin even specifically looked up the Quidditch team that Professor McGonagall liked and found that the team's most glorious record was defeating the then European champion Wrocław Vultures in 1932. That game lasted for 16 days. Anjuin even specifically confirmed it again. A game lasting 16 days, wasn't this a joke? Professor Flitwick was very thoughtful and sent Anjuin a copy of Quintessence, a quest, and stated in the greeting card that it was actually a 6th-year textbook, but he believed that with Anjuin's current progress, he could already do some learning. Anjuin was very happy with this gift, which was also Anjuin's favorite gift besides Vivian's. When Anjuin opened Professor Slughorn's gift, he couldn't help but laugh, because he was too familiar with this gift. It was a bottle of Felix Felicis. Anjuin guessed that his head of house must have brewed a lot of Felix Felicis to give away as gifts in batches. Hagrid's gift was very simple, a fur cushion made of unknown fur, which was very comfortable and warm to sit on. Anjuin immediately took it out and used it. After checking the gifts from several friends, Anjuin sat on the fur cushion sent by Hagrid and continued to study occlumency. This magic and legilimency seemed to be complementary. After learning occlumency, legilimency would be easier to master. In books such as Magical Theory of Defense and Mysteries of Magical Defense, there are records of this magic. This magic has certain requirements for the learner's willpower and psychological quality. During practice, you need to empty your mind and always maintain a calm and peaceful psychological state. Then, operate and control magic power, integrate your thoughts with magic power, and use the fused power to wrap your brain. This way, you can defend against many mind-reading and thought-sensing magics. This kind of magic that doesn't require incantations is very difficult for most wizards, because it requires good self-control. The simplest way to learn this magic is to ask a Legilimen's master to cooperate, constantly perform Legilimency on the learner, and passively try to defend. Through continuous training, the learner can familiarize themselves with the process of closing the brain while defending against Legilimency. But Anjuin didn't plan to do this. First of all, he didn't know any Legilimen's masters, and secondly, he didn't want people to peek into his thoughts at will. In the various magic books that Anjuin had read, several methods were introduced, including the potion practice method, the passive practice method, and the self-imagination method, etc. The passive practice method was to let the Legilimen's master invade the brain, and then feel the process in passive defense. This method had been passed by Anjuin. The potion practice method required drinking a tranquilizer in advance and then trying to practice. This method could be considered. Anjuin also had tranquilizers. Finally, the most difficult method was the self-imagination method, which Anjuin himself called the visualization method, that is, after emptying the mind, imagine another self in the brain, and can give himself various shapes. Like in Magical Theory of Defense, it is recorded that someone imagined himself as a dragon, and then tried to use magic to immerse himself in his consciousness. Anjuin considered for a while and decided to try the visualization method first. After all, his magic control ability was very strong, and his consistent practice of meditation also gave him his own experience in regulating his thoughts. Chapter 65. Anjuin first constantly adjusted his breathing, then stood up and adopted a Hunyuan stance, the basic stance of Tai Chi. When practicing the stance, most of your energy needs to be focused on adjusting your body posture. A key point of this stance is to find the most coordinated position of your neck, waist, hips, and feet, and then maintain it. This is also Anjuin's usual way of calming his mind and adjusting his mood. After assuming the stance, Anjuin instinctively adjusted the subtle positions of various parts of his body. During this process, his mind was almost completely empty, without any distractions. Then, he mobilized his magic, slowly surging towards his brain, and then constantly tried to immerse the magic into his consciousness, which was the most difficult part. Anjuin was attempting a visualization technique. He didn't visualize himself as any strange creature in his mind, but rather as a black hole with no light whatsoever. Then, he constantly tried to suck magic into it. Thanks to Anjuin's usual practice, he entered a meditative state very quickly, and mobilizing magic was not difficult for him. However, during the visualization stage, Anjuin tried several times, but eventually succeeded. Half an hour later, Anjuin ended this attempt and slowly opened his eyes. Hey! After finishing, Anjuin was very surprised by his state when recalling the practice process. It wasn't that Anjuin was surprised that his attempt had no effect, he hadn't initially thought he could learn this difficult magic so quickly. Anjuin was surprised that he might, perhaps, seemingly have successfully performed occlumency on his first try. Comparing his experience with the descriptions of successful occlumency in the magic books, Anjuin confirmed that he had indeed mastered the basics of this difficult magic. During the practice, Anjuin's progress could almost be described as a natural course. In his visualization, he transformed into a black hole, then remotely controlled the magic to slowly seep in. This process was almost effortless, and he also completed the attempt to envelop his thoughts with this magic very smoothly. Anjuin had only experienced this rapid cultivation speed when learning the levitation charm. Although he learned other spells relatively easily, it still required constant repetition to successfully master the basics. But occlumency was like learning the levitation charm, he easily grasped the basics on his first try. Am I a genius at learning occlumency? Or is there really an academy talent bonus? Or does regular exercise and practice provide a bonus to learning this type of magic? Just like when I practiced superpowers for many years, does that mean that standing and meditating, in addition to regulating the mind and emotions, also has an auxiliary effect on this kind of mental magic? Anjuin pondered various possibilities, as if he had grasped something, but not quite. Shaking his head, Anjuin forced himself to clear these thoughts. Anyway, successful practice is a fact, so he should fully learn it before thinking about anything else. Immediately afterwards, Anjuin tried to perform occlumency once to see, but perhaps because he wasn't proficient enough, the process of magic operation was very obscure. Anjuin exhaled lightly, it seemed that he needed more practice to be able to use occlumency anytime, anywhere. This successful experience made Anjuin very excited, so he decided to practice occlumency every night. After mastering this magic, he would try legilimency. Anjuin had a feeling that perhaps legilimency practice would be as easy as occlumency. In the following days, Anjuin spent his days practicing his skills and helping out in the potter's house, and studying runes and runic knowledge at the rune table. He spent his evenings in his room practicing occlumency. A week passed quickly, and it was almost time to return to school. Anjuin packed his luggage. Since Sirius gave him the space bag, Anjuin finally didn't have to drag large boxes of luggage around. Anjuin gained a lot from this vacation. The runic knowledge he learned in these few days was enough for him to digest for a while. After happily packing his luggage, Anjuin prepared to go downstairs to have one last breakfast with the Potters, and then say goodbye to them. Anjuin, have you packed your luggage? Come and sit down and have something to eat. We have a surprise for you later. Seeing the neatly dressed Anjuin coming downstairs, Lily greeted him kindly. Anjuin was confused, but he still obediently entered the dining room, teasing Harry while eating breakfast. During this week, Harry seemed to have become familiar with this strange older brother, and always played with him happily. Anjuin teased Harry with an apple. Little Harry wanted to grab it but couldn't, and was so anxious that he was about to cry. In the end, Anjuin put the small apple in Harry's arms. James, seeing that these two guys had such a good relationship, couldn't help but smile and said to Anjuin, "Anjuin, you are going back to Hogwarts today. Lily and I have prepared a gift for you, and I think you'll like it." Anjuin was puzzled when he heard this and said, "A gift? But I've already received your Christmas gifts, and I like them very much. What other gift are you giving me?" At this time, Lily also walked in holding a package, and smiled at Anjuin and said, "This is a gift to thank you. During the battle a few days ago, you were always taking care of and protecting Harry. I see that you are so interested in runic research, so James and I prepared this gift for you." Anjuin was about to refuse when Lily interrupted him and said, "Don't rush to refuse, open it and see what it is first." With that said, Lily opened the package in her hand, and inside was a disc the size of a wash basin, which looked like stone, but also had a metallic texture. There was also a book on the disc. James explained, "I heard Lily say that you are very interested in studying runes, so I prepared this. This is a rune disc, and its function is similar to a rune workbench. Although the effect is not as good as a workbench, it can also be used to learn runic characters and try to combine runes." Lily also said, "That's right, this rune disc is like a simple rune workbench, with the functions of manifestation and combination, but it cannot record and test." Then Lily took out the magic book placed on it and said, "This is a magic character collection tool book. It is blank and can record 100 characters and 10 runes. I have already stored more than 40 common 3-dimensional magic characters in it. Generally, planar magic characters do not need to be recorded in it. In the future, you can also record the 3-dimensional magic characters you want to record in this book." Chapter 66. However, since it's not equipped with a crystal ball for storage, we can't test it. But I believe it's sufficient for learning and some simple research. How is it, do you like it?" Lily said, a faint smile on her face, as she slowly explained to Anjuin. Upon hearing this, Anjuin realized that the two were giving him such a valuable gift. He wanted to refuse, but he couldn't control the desire deep within his heart. As a result, the law of true fragrance took over once again. After accepting the rune disc, Anjuin restrained his urge to start researching it immediately, carefully put it away, and repeatedly thanked Mr. and Mrs. Potter. "All right, Anjuin, no need to be so polite with us. It's getting late, I'll take you to the train station now," James said to Anjuin with a smile. And so, Anjuin ended his Christmas vacation and the happy time he spent with Sirius and the Potters, and set off back to Hogwarts. After saying goodbye to James at the station, Anjuin boarded the train back. In the carriage, Vivian and Charles had already arrived. They were sharing snacks that Vivian had brought back from France. As soon as they saw Anjuin enter, Charles excitedly pulled Anjuin down to sit. "Hey, Anjuin, I heard from my aunt that you are really amazing." Charles was about to discuss the news he had heard with Anjuin, but Anjuin interrupted him with a look and shook his head, so he had to shut up. "What are you talking about? What's amazing?" Vivian asked, her eyes narrowed involuntarily, unable to resist inquiring. "It's nothing, I won a big prize during Christmas, nothing to brag about." Anjuin didn't want to spread the story about fighting Death Eaters everywhere. After all, he was still in Slytherin, and if he told Vivian, the big mouth, the whole school would know. "Oh, really?" Vivian clearly didn't believe it, and looked at Charles with questioning eyes. Seeing Vivian staring at him, Charles had to make an excuse that he had friends from his house waiting for him, and quietly ran away. "Humph!" Vivian snorted in dissatisfaction, but seeing Anjuin nonchalantly open a book and start reading, she had to give up. But after a while, Vivian forgot about it and started chatting with Anjuin about her experiences in France. The two ate snacks and chatted, taking the steam train back to Hogwarts. After returning to Hogwarts, Anjuin returned to his previous ghost-like life, but his daily study plan underwent some changes. Since those powerful spells couldn't be practiced for the time being, Anjuin redistributed his time. He spent some time practicing basic spells and transfiguration, and most of the remaining time was spent using the rune disc to study runes and runic magic. He also spent 30 to 40 minutes each night practicing occlumency. The day after returning to Hogwarts, Anjuin couldn't help but run to Hagrid's. This time he bought a lot of various seasonings, ready to enjoy several happy meals at Hagrid's. Hagrid's hut was covered in silver, with thick layers of snow on the roof. Anjuin came in and found no one inside, not even Fang. He went to the fireplace and lit a fire without any hesitation. He was very familiar with this place, so he didn't stand on ceremony. The bonfire in the fireplace was burning brightly, constantly dispelling the cold air in the house. Anjuin used the stove next to him to boil a pot of water and made a cup of tea. While pouring the water, he saw that Hagrid was indeed using the large copper cup he had given him, thinking that the size was quite suitable. Holding the teacup, Anjuin sat on the sofa by the bonfire like an old man, listening to the crackling of the pine wood burning in the fireplace, and a feeling of tranquility welled up in his heart. So he sat by the fireplace, reading a book, sipping tea and enjoying the warmth of the fire, leisurely passing the time. After an unknown amount of time, a dog barked outside the hut. Anjuin knew it was Hagrid coming back. The tranquil and comfortable feeling just now had made Anjuin very comfortable, causing him to even forget the passage of time. The sky outside was even gradually darkening. "Hi, Anjuin, you're back," Hagrid said with a hearty greeting as he carried a huge object into the house, just in time to see Anjuin sitting by the fire. Fang, the boarhound next to him, saw Anjuin and excitedly ran up to him, constantly rubbing against Anjuin's legs. "Yeah, I just got back yesterday. Today happens to be the weekend, and school doesn't start until tomorrow, so I came over after lunch." "Where did you go? Why were you gone for so long?" Hagrid shook off the snow on his body and unloaded a large object from his shoulder onto the table in the room, and said with a smile, "You came at the right time. Professor Kettleben previously cultivated a herd of rune spores in the Forbidden Forest. Today, a cow died, and Professor Kettleben asked me to help. The professor even shared a large piece of beef with me." Anjuin stepped forward to take a closer look and found that it was indeed a large piece, because it looked like about 1/8 of a whole cow, but the size of this piece of meat was at least half a cow. "Are rune spores very large? Can these animals be raised in the Forbidden Forest? How many animals does Professor Kettleben actually raise in the Forbidden Forest?" Anjuin felt that this care of magical creatures professor was like a farmer, raising a bunch of edible magical animals, just like the wart pigs last time. The professor really does raise a lot. There are already many magical animal populations in the Forbidden Forest, such as thestrals, hippogriffs, unicorns, and so on. At the same time, the professor has also cultivated many magical creature populations, such as rune spores, wart pigs, graphorns, moon calves, and so on. Every year, these little guys cause a lot of trouble, and Professor Kettleben is very worried. The professor said that raising and cultivating them is to restore these populations. Many magical creatures are endangered because they have many high-value resources on their bodies, so they are overhunted. Only after the populations are grown can the resources produced by magical creatures be greater, Hagrid repeated Professor Kettleburns' words. It seems that this professor also understands the principle of sustainable development. Today really exhausted me. This cow is bigger than 3 normal cows. Its blood is the main material for making strengthening potions. The professor and I spent half a day processing this corpse. Hagrid grabbed the copper cup next to him and drank a full cup of water. Anjuin studied the large piece of beef and said, "Hey, that's great. With this beef, we can have a beef hot pot later." Chapter 67. Hot pot? What's that? Hagrid asked, unfamiliar with the term. "It's just delicious food, you just wait, let me deal with this beef first," Anjuin said confidently. Immediately afterwards, Anjuin took out his wand and directed the knives in Hagrid's room to cut the beef. There was so much meat that he couldn't eat it all at once. He first sliced out 4 large plates of beef slices, and then hung the remaining beef outside the hut to freeze. Then, he took out the large copper pot he had bought in Chinatown from his linen space bag. Anjuin didn't expect to use it so soon. He picked up a few pieces of charcoal from the stove, put them in the copper core in the center of the pot, added water and chopped some green onions and ginger to cook, and that was it. Anjuin took out chopsticks and said to Hagrid, "Okay, once the water boils, we'll put the meat in and swish it around, then add the sauce I made, and that's it." Hagrid also sat at the table with a fork in his hand and said, "Is it that simple? What's the difference between this and ordinary boiled meat?" "You'll know when you taste it," Anjuin didn't say much, and smiled. Then Hagrid began his first hot pot journey. The originally ordinary meat slices, paired with Anjuin's sesame sauce, instantly created a complex aroma, assaulting his taste buds, making Hagrid constantly exclaim how enjoyable it was. The two of them kept adding ingredients to the hot pot, eating with great relish. After the meal, Hagrid patted his full stomach with satisfaction and said, "Anjuin, you know so much, I wish you could live here." The speaker didn't mean much, but the listener took it to heart. When Anjuin heard this, he had some ideas. It didn't seem impossible. Usually, besides going to class, he basically stayed in his room in the Slytherin common room. Staying underground every day, although seeing the scenery in the lake was nice, it wasn't as good as the open scenery here, and he could enjoy bonfires and delicious food. It wouldn't be bad to live here occasionally. So Anjuin said to Hagrid, "It's not impossible to live here occasionally. This place is big, and it's convenient for me to practice spells and martial arts, but you only have one house here, where would I sleep if I lived here?" When Hagrid heard that Anjuin was willing to live here, he was very excited to think that someone could accompany him, and said, "It doesn't matter, I can build another room for you next door. There are many trees in the Forbidden Forest, and it won't take a few days to get you a room." Anjuin thought about it and felt it was okay, so he nodded and said, "Okay, I'll come over to help every afternoon starting tomorrow. I'll move in to accompany you after the small house is built. Although I can't stay with you every day, it's no problem to live here 2 or 3 days a week." When Hagrid heard this, he naturally nodded in agreement. You know, he stayed here to watch over the Forbidden Forest. Usually, besides raising some small animals to accompany him, Professor Kettleben would occasionally come to see him. Although he was also staying at Hogwarts, he was usually very bored. After discussing it, Anjuin went straight back to the castle. The next day, at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Anjuin, after finishing his class, ran towards Hagrid's hut. When Anjuin arrived outside the hut, he found that Hagrid had already chopped a lot of wood and piled stones next to him, and Hagrid himself was cleaning the land next to the hut, and had already leveled the ground with a radius of 10 square meters. It seemed that he was even more active than Anjuin. Seeing this, Anjuin quickly stepped forward to help, and together they cleaned the surrounding ground, and then used a cutting curse to cut 4 thick logs, inserted them in the 4 corners of the leveled ground, and then used magic to lift the stones one by one, arranged them in a long line to cover the ground, and then used a cutting curse to level the ground to ensure there were no uneven places. After all, they were not bricks, and the flatness could not be guaranteed. Then it was time to build the outer wall, also cutting the wood and laying it seamlessly on the ground. Hagrid took nails and a hammer to nail the wall panels firmly. After the horizontal and vertical planks were nailed, Anjuin used a floating curse to control the wall panels to stand on 2 wooden stakes, and Hagrid nailed the wall panels and wooden stakes firmly. In this way, 1 wall was completed. After repeating it 3 times, the 4 walls were installed. One of the walls was directly nailed to Hagrid's hut because it was close to Hagrid's hut. After finishing all this, it was evening. Anjuin followed suit and had another hot pot meal with Hagrid before returning to the castle. In the following days, he went to Hagrid's to help build the house after class, the roof, the indoor fireplace, the wooden floor, the door, the windows. Hagrid also thoughtfully built a small balcony outside Anjuin's room, so that he could sit outside the room to rest or have afternoon tea when he had nothing to do. 2 doors were installed in the room, one leading directly to the outside, going out through the balcony with eaves, and going down a 3-section small wooden staircase, which was Hagrid's vegetable garden, and the other door leading directly to Hagrid's house. Hagrid personally made a lot of furniture for Anjuin's small room. It must be said that Hagrid's woodworking skills were really good, and he also helped lay leather carpets. Soon, this room was completed. Anjuin also moved to live next door to Hagrid. The style of the room was very similar to Hagrid's hut. Whether it was the bed, tables, chairs, or wardrobe, they all gave a rough feeling. The carpets and bedding were also made of fur products. The whole cabin gave a feeling of a hunter's cabin. Since Anjuin ran to Hagrid's to live from time to time, it was even more difficult to find Anjuin in Hogwarts. Even Vivian couldn't find him sometimes. Except for when he suddenly appeared from nowhere during class, she couldn't even see him during meal times now. This day, after Anjuin finished his History of Magic class, he did not go directly back to Hagrid's hut, but turned upstairs and walked into a boys' bathroom, where someone was waiting for him. "Randall, you are very punctual," Anjuin said with a slight smile, looking at Randall Rosier in front of him. Anjuin, what do you want to do to let me go?" Rosier looked at Anjuin with fear in his eyes. Anjuin walked forward, put one hand on Rosier's shoulder, and said with a smile, "Don't make me sound like a devil, you see I haven't treated you badly, haven't I? Wasn't your brother killed? This way your order of inheritance in the family will be improved, right?" By the way, did you bring this month's protection fee? Rosier, who was being held, was already very nervous, but after hearing Anjuin's words, he trembled even more, and said tremblingly, Evan's death is indeed related to you. His matter has turned the family upside down. How can I have the time to think about inheritance? I really have no money. I risked taking a few magic books from the family, see if they can be used to pay off the debt. Chapter 68. With that, he handed the books in his hand to Anjuin. Anjuin took them and flipped through them, discovering that he had never seen 4 of them before. 2 were about dark magic, 1 involved potions, and 1 was actually a collection of runes, containing many rare rune combination formulas. Not bad, these 4 books will offset your 4 months of protection fees. I'll return the originals to you after I've copied them. How about it? I'm still very kind, right? Anjuin said happily. Hearing Anjuin's words, Rosier's uneasy heart was half relieved, and he quickly nodded in agreement. By the way, what about Traverse? Hasn't he been thinking about causing me trouble recently? You know, I left him lying in the Oloi for an afternoon. Anjuin put away the books and asked with a smile. He's wanted to cause you trouble more than once, but you're so elusive every day except for class time that he can't find you at all. Recently, he's been hanging out with Prefects Wilkes and Yaxley, thinking all day about how to deal with Gryffindor. Rosier said truthfully. Anjuin thought for a while, it seemed that he really hadn't been staying in the castle much recently. He basically ran back to the Forbidden Forest cabin after class to study magic. As for the conflict between them and Gryffindor, Anjuin didn't intend to interfere. He had previously thought their fight would be a bloody mess, and even ran to remind Charles once. Later, he discovered that children were indeed children, and their fights were just like pranks, so Anjuin became too lazy to participate. Okay, Rosier, your performance is good. If you have any trouble, you can tell me. The protection fee won't be paid in vain. I'll cover you from now on. Anjuin said. Rosier couldn't avoid Anjuin fast enough, so he wouldn't dare to take the initiative to find him. He had to respond with a few words, just wanting to get rid of this guy as soon as possible. After the two parted, Anjuin returned to the cabin and began to look through Rosier's books. As expected, the knowledge passed down by those long-standing families is the greatest foundation. They even have bloodline magic. Anjuin gained a lot after carefully reading them. One of the dark magic books contained a lot of knowledge about bloodline magic, and the potion book even had the recipe for the Blood Fury potion. The Blood Fury potion, whose full name is Dragon Blood Rage Elixir, mainly uses dragon blood as its raw material. It uses many poisonous raw materials to contaminate the dragon blood, and then boils it. It is a forbidden potion that is strictly prohibited. After taking it, it can cause a berserk-like effect, and the resistance to magic can also be greatly increased. The user's own power and control over magic will also be greatly enhanced, but the side effects are also very obvious. After the potion's effect ends, there will be obvious blood loss, and there is a certain probability of causing people to go directly crazy and lose their minds. No wonder Evan Rosier has this potion, but to dare to drink this kind of potion, should I say you're brave or are you out of your mind? After reading the description of this potion, Anjuin smiled mockingly. Next, Anjuin prepared to copy the magic books. It is not advisable to directly copy them with the Gemino curse. The copied duplicates will disappear after the magic power dissipates. The proper way is to prepare a blank book or parchment, as well as ink, and use the word replication charm to transcribe the text, so that the books can be preserved for a long time. After busying himself for a while, Anjuin finally copied all 4 books with magic. The process of copying also allowed him to practice spells, which was not boring for Anjuin. Fortunately, this is not the kind of magic book that contains magic power. Most of those magic books are unique copies, and you must be familiar with curse breaking and alchemy to copy them successfully. Anjuin heard that there was a book called The Wizard's Sonnets, which would even curse the person who read it. People who have read this book can only speak in 5-line doggerel poems for the rest of their lives. It seems that I have to speed up my study of runes and magic characters. If I want to learn curse breaking and breaking curses, this knowledge is essential, so as not to be harmed by a cursed book one day. With a plan in mind, Anjuin began his tedious study of magic characters again, constantly using the rune plate to materialize the magic characters, learning to combine them according to the various common runes in the collection of magical glyphs. This method not only allowed him to more thoroughly understand the meaning and concept of various magic characters, but also gave him a deeper understanding of these spells. When analyzing the impediment jinx before, Anjuin felt that he had a deeper understanding of the impediment jinx. When casting the spell, it was easier to control and the shaping became much easier. Now Anjuin has been able to condense the impedimenta into a ball the size of a fist. Anjuin calls it the obstacle ball, and its power is greatly increased when launched. Recently, he has also been studying whether it is possible to detonate the shaped obstacle ball when it is launched. 2 weeks later, in a transfiguration class, Professor McGonagall was explaining the differences and precautions between the transformation charm and the transfiguration charm. Anjuin summarized that the transformation charm is a complete transformation, and the transfiguration charm is a partial transformation, but Professor McGonagall still gave a long lecture for an hour. Alright, that's it for this class. Next class, you will start trying to transform a rat into a snuff box. This requires very hard practice, and maybe this will be the question on your final exam. Professor McGonagall finally finished her transfiguration charm content. Anjuin was very speechless about Professor McGonagall's behavior of revealing the question. Maybe, she said, isn't that a confirmation? Just as he was about to pack his things and return to the cabin, Professor McGonagall stopped him. After the other students left one after another, Professor McGonagall said to Anjuin, "Anjuin, Headmaster Dumbledore is looking for you." When Anjuin heard this, he guessed whether the Ministry of Magic's award had arrived, and he couldn't help but feel happy. He said with a smile, "Yes, Professor McGonagall, I'll go over right away." Well, the password for the headmaster's office is Fizzing Whizbees. After Professor McGonagall finished speaking, she thought for a while and said, "Anjuin, I've heard about what happened during Christmas. Your courage is amazing, but as a professor, I still have to remind you to pay attention to your own safety. In the current situation, it's not something a small wizard like you should be meddling in." Professor McGonagall said to Anjuin with a serious face. Anjuin knew that Professor McGonagall was worried about him, so he smiled and nodded, "Don't worry, Professor, I won't put myself in danger lightly, but when danger comes to my door, calmness and decisiveness can better protect myself." McGonagall knew that Anjuin was very rational, but as an elder, she couldn't help but want to nag the young people. Hearing Anjuin's reply, she also nodded and said, "All right, go ahead, Dumbledore is in the office now." Chapter 69. Anjuin bid farewell to Professor McGonagall and went up the main tower. On the 8th floor, he found a gargoyle. After reciting the password Professor McGonagall taught him, the gargoyle jumped aside, and the stone wall behind it split in two, revealing a spiral staircase that slowly ascended. When Anjuin entered the office, Dumbledore was standing behind the door, teasing a beautiful crimson bird perched on a branch, which looked very similar to the phoenix he had seen in the book. At this moment, Dumbledore turned around, looked at Anjuin with a smile, and said, "Sorry, Fawkes has been feeling lonely recently. I haven't been spending much time in the office, just keeping him company, and didn't notice you. I just came in too, Headmaster. Is Fawkes a phoenix? He looks very similar to the phoenix portraits I saw in the book." Anjuin smiled at Headmaster Dumbledore and asked curiously. "Yes, your observation is very keen. As a phoenix, he has very sensitive emotions, which makes this old man very embarrassed." Dumbledore playfully teased Fawkes, who haughtily turned his head away, seemingly disliking Dumbledore's teasing, leaving the headmaster with no choice but to shrug to ease the awkwardness. Anjuin found it very interesting that this phoenix had such rich emotional expression, and couldn't help but take a few more glances at Fawkes. All right, he's still shy. Staring at him will make him uncomfortable. "Come, sit down," Dumbledore said when he saw that Fawkes wasn't paying much attention to Anjuin. "He's quite proud," Anjuin silently complained in his heart, as he followed Dumbledore to the desk and sat down. Only then did Anjuin have time to take a closer look at the headmaster's office. It was a spacious and beautiful circular room, with portraits of former headmasters and headmistresses hanging on the wall behind the desk. At this time, the people in the portraits were in various poses, some pondering with their heads down, some dozing with their eyes closed, and some not even in the frames. One of them saw Anjuin looking at him and even glared back. "Would you like some candy first? Recently, I've been very fond of lemon sherbet drops. That sweet and sour taste always reminds me of my younger days," Dumbledore said with a smile, taking a candy jar from the cabinet next to him and recommending it to Anjuin. "Thank you, Professor, but I prefer chocolate. And in our Muggle world, there's a saying, the more people love to reminisce about the past, the more it shows they're getting old. You look young, maybe you can spend more time thinking about the future. Anjuin politely declined the candy jar Dumbledore offered. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows upon hearing this, and said with a smile, "That's a very wise saying. I can see that you have your own opinions, so I won't force you." With that, he took back the candy jar and stuffed a small handful of candies into his mouth. "Is this headmaster so fond of sweets? There are sweets in the room, and the password for the headmaster's office is also a sweet," Anjuin thought to himself. "Let's talk about business. You should have guessed why I called you here. The Ministry of Magic's commendation order has arrived, I'll let you have a look." Dumbledore smiled and took out a piece of parchment with the Ministry of Magic's logo on it, and handed it to Anjuin. Anjuin took it and saw that it was all about thanking and commending Anjuin for bravely assisting in the fight against an arrest of Death Eaters during Christmas. Anjuin quickly skimmed through the contents and looked at the reward details. Mr. Anjuin Wilson is hereby awarded the British Ministry of Magic's Silver Medal of Valor and 500 galleons. Not bad, that's generous. Anjuin's impression of the Ministry of Magic greatly improved, and he also greatly appreciated Minister Millicent Bagnold's efficiency. As expected of a good minister in the magical world. In a great mood, Anjuin couldn't help but sing praises to Minister Bagnold in his heart, and couldn't help but smile. Dumbledore saw Anjuin chuckling and didn't interrupt him. After a while, he took out a delicate velvet-wrapped small box and a large bag of galleons, and said to Anjuin, "Come, our little hero, these are the prizes the Ministry of Magic gave you." Anjuin immediately took it. The galleons, of course, gave a sense of security in terms of weight. He didn't open the leather bag to check in a mercenary manner, but put it aside and first opened the box containing the medal. Inside lay quietly a circular silver medal connected by a dark short ribbon. Exquisite patterns were engraved on it, and the center of the badge was engraved with a capital letter M, symbolizing the Ministry of Magic. Originally, the Minister of Magic was going to present it to you in person. After all, she thought it was very necessary to have some young people as role models. However, after my persuasion, Millicent agreed to your request and will not make it public for the time being, but if there is a chance in the future, she may still make it public, Dumbledore said with a smile as he watched Anjuin excitedly playing with the medal. "Thank you, Professor, and please thank Minister Bagnold for me. I am already very satisfied with the current situation," Anjuin said to Dumbledore with a smile, still excited. "Well, by the way, there's another gift for you, which was sent to you by a friend who doesn't want to reveal their name." Dumbledore nodded first, then seemed to suddenly remember something, took out a crystal bottle from the drawer next to him, and handed it to Anjuin. Anjuin took it and saw that it was a potion. The crystal bottles containing the potions were very delicate, completely different from the glass potion bottles he usually used for potion making, and couldn't help but look at Dumbledore in confusion. "This is Baruffio's brain elixir, a very difficult potion to make. I've checked it, there's no problem, it should be said to be very good. It can significantly enhance the taker's brain power, but the effect is very strong. Just pour half an ounce into water and take it every day. Taking too much can cause headaches, nausea, and even coma," Dumbledore said. When Anjuin heard that this was the famous Baruffio's brain elixir, he was shocked. This potion costs at least hundreds of galleons on the market, and it is still in a state where there is a price but no market, because this potion is very difficult to make, and the materials are very rare. If there is any mistake in the production process, it can easily become a poison that can turn people into idiots. Who is it that can give such a potion as a gift? This potion is too precious, can I know who gave it to me? Anjuin looked solemnly at the crystal bottle in his hand, and couldn't help but ask Dumbledore. Chapter 70. The person who gifted this potion doesn't wish to reveal their name, so I must keep this secret. It was a gift given out of kindness, and I think they would be saddened if you refused it. Reading Dumbledore didn't reveal Snape's intentions, as his identity needed to be kept completely secret. "I understand, thank you, and please thank that friend for me." Anjuin wasn't being coy, since someone insisted on giving it, not accepting would be disrespectful. He wasn't that kind of person. Of course, such an amazing potion was too tempting to refuse, it was simply too appealing. "I will convey that to my friend. The Potters and Sirius have asked about you recently, but unfortunately, I haven't had the peace of mind to stay in my office and care for the students for quite some time. Is there anything you'd like me to tell them?" Dumbledore had been traveling back and forth, either lobbying the Wisengamot Council members or discussing strategies with the elders of the Phoenix Order. Most of the time he was in his office, he was writing letters, reading letters, monitoring Death Eater movements, and so on. Dealing with the Dark Lord was indeed consuming a great deal of his energy. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Anduin realized that he hadn't corresponded with his friends for a long time, so he said, "Then could you please pass a message to Sirius? Tell him not to mess up the room I spent so much time cleaning again." Dumbledore nodded with a smile. "Also, please tell the Potters that I'm doing well and that I'm very grateful for the gifts they sent. Also, tell them to be safe and watch out for Death Eater attacks." Anduin didn't know if his presence had changed history. In his understanding, the original storyline of the Potter's death might have occurred during the previous Christmas attack, but he was still very worried about Lily's safety. He had said similar things many times when he lived with Lily, but for them, confronting the Dark Lord and facing danger was normal. He didn't know if they had listened. If Dumbledore could also remind them, it might be more effective. "Oh? Why do you think the Potters would be targeted by Death Eaters?" Dumbledore raised an eyebrow, looking at Anduin thoughtfully. Anduin told the truth. "It's very simple. During the Christmas attack, some Death Eaters ignored the main battlefield and sneaked in to attack Lily and Alice. That's too strange. One of the Death Eaters even took a blood-boiling potion during the battle. In that situation, if they had appeared on the main battlefield and taken that potion, it might have turned the tide of the battle. So I considered that those Death Eaters were targeting Lily or Alice." After listening to Anduin's reasoning, Dumbledore nodded in admiration and said, "Then how do you know they weren't targeting someone else?" Anduin was puzzled by Dumbledore's question and said, "I was the only one there at the time, Augusta, Lily, Alice, and their 2 children. If they were after me and Augusta, there would be no need to go to such lengths. As for the 2 children, there's no need to target them." Considering that Anduin didn't know the inside story, Dumbledore felt that he had demonstrated his wisdom by reaching such a conclusion. He then nodded to Anduin and said, "Well, rest assured, I have also considered this. They will be safe, I promise." Hearing Dumbledore's words, Anduin assumed that there shouldn't be any problems, so he said goodbye to Dumbledore and returned to the Forbidden Forest cabin. A very clever little wizard, don't you think, Albus? No wonder he's a Slytherin student. After Anduin left, a portrait on the office wall spoke. If Anduin were still here, he would recognize that this was the painting that had glared at him before. Dumbledore nodded and said, "Indeed, Phineas, this Slytherin wizard is Muggle-born." Phineas's eyes widened and he said, "That's impossible. How could Slytherin accept a Muggle-born wizard? You must be mistaken, his ancestors must have had noble blood flowing through them." "That's not necessarily true. I remember when I was in office, there was a Muggle-born wizard who entered Slytherin." "It's not completely impossible, just rare," said a portrait a few frames away from Phineas. "Shut up, Dexter, I won't allow you to tarnish Slytherin's glory," Phineas roared, glaring. Still sitting in his chair, Dumbledore listened to the former headmasters arguing, acting like a bystander, reaching out and grabbing a handful of candy to chew slowly. Time flew by, the ice and snow melted, and Hogwarts welcomed spring. In addition to studying spells and runes every day, Anduin had another task, which was to help Hagrid cultivate the vegetable garden outside the cabin. Anduin asked Hagrid to buy a lot of vegetable seedlings and plant them together in the small vegetable garden. Hogwarts was about to usher in the Easter holiday, also lasting 2 weeks. Anduin had written to Sirius and Lily to ask if he could visit during the holiday. But the letters sent to the Potter's house had not been delivered recently, as if the owl couldn't find their location, and Anduin couldn't remember Lily's address for some reason. Sirius replied in time, but he seemed very busy this Easter and told Anduin not to go to his previous residence, as it was no longer safe. Anduin asked Sirius about Lily's news. Sirius just told him that Lily's family had been placed in a safe place that no one could find, which put Anduin's mind at ease. At this time, Anduin also realized that the Potters might have been hidden by Dumbledore with magic, otherwise there was no way to explain why Anduin had inexplicably forgotten the address of the Potters family. In this way, Anduin decided to stay at school during the Easter holiday and not go off campus. Occlumency has been fully mastered. If I feel right, I will soon reach the level of proficiency. The rest of the self-defense spells have also been practiced to the level of proficiency, and those research topics of the spell club can also be tried to develop. Deciding to stay at school, Anduin considered the arrangements for this holiday. In the recent spell club, Senior Quirrell's amplifying charm has progressed rapidly, and it can clearly enhance the sound reception effect, and can receive sound at a fixed point and direction, but the spells developed are as Anjuin expected, and they are already so long that it is difficult to read them in one breath. You can't finally develop a spell that requires you to take a breath to finish reading it. Chapter 71. Often, after a new spell is developed, it takes a long time to refine the incantation. Sometimes, a practical spell will undergo years, decades, or even generations of refinement to adapt to the masses and become widely circulated. Vanessa's research on the separation charm has also made some progress. The technique she developed to enhance casting accuracy, which Anjuin calls precise control, requires strong magical perception and control to cast. Currently, only some senior students in the Magic Club can successfully cast it. Anjuin, however, feels that this casting technique is very valuable and can even be applied to many other spells. His previous advancement of the levitation charm into the extraordinary realm was not unrelated to his mastery of this technique. Anjuin has already decided on his magic research topic, which is the development ideas and application directions of sonic spells. First, he has mastered the sound-related spells Sonorous, Quietus, and Silencio. Second, the related runes and runic symbols are not complex, and he has them all recorded. Furthermore, Senior Quirrell's development of the amplifying charm is also a sonic spell, providing a reference point. He is trying two research directions. One is ultrasound, using its good directionality and high frequency. Then, imitating the characteristics of bats, he wants to develop a spell that can locate through echolocation. In this way, after using this spell, it is like deploying a directional radar, which helps to identify the environment and search for enemies, even if they use the disillusionment charm. The other direction is infrasound. Powerful infrasound has strong lethality and penetration. After being received by the human body, it can cause dizziness, nausea, and other symptoms. If the intensity is high enough, it can even be fatal. If he can develop a spell that utilizes infrasound, it would be equivalent to developing a powerful AoE skill with interference and killing performance. Like Senior Quirrell, without the assistance of a runic array, he can only depict runes on paper, perform runic combinations, and then translate the runes into spells to test whether the spell is useful. However, Anjuin has a strong advantage in developing spells compared to Senior Quirrell, that is, he has strong perception and control over magic power, and he has experience in silent casting. Therefore, he does not need to translate the runes into spells to test, and he has a runic array, which is much faster in terms of efficiency. Therefore, during the Easter holidays, Anjuin hardly left his house, analyzing the runes of sonic spells on the runic array while sketching runic formulas on parchment. At the same time, Anjuin also began to take baffling brain elixir regularly and in fixed quantities. The effect was very obvious. Anjuin could clearly feel that his thinking speed was getting faster, and his memory and reaction abilities were gradually getting stronger, which greatly increased his efficiency in magic learning and research. From many potion books, Anjuin learned that baffling brain elixir is best taken when performing brain work. Taking it usually will also have good effects, but if you don't use your brain often, the effects will gradually dissipate over time. Only by thinking and remembering more during the period of taking it will you still maintain strong benefits after the taking time has passed. This is a bit like protein powder. Eating it usually will only make you inexplicably fat, and you will slowly lose weight after you stop eating it. Only by eating and exercising at the same time will it quickly be converted into muscle. After the Christmas War, there were no major battles in the magical world, only sporadic small conflicts continued. Anjuin could see from the Daily Prophet that the war was gradually becoming fierce. As the end of the term approached, Anjuin was also considering where to spend the holidays. For some reason, Sirius Black was constantly wandering around, and many Death Eaters seemed to regard him as a target, while the Potter couple seemed to have disappeared. Anjuin couldn't contact them at all. Could it be that I can only go back to the Leaky Cauldron during the summer vacation? But with the current situation, Diagon Alley is not very safe either. Anjuin was very troubled by the arrangements for the summer vacation. He planned to ask Professor McGonagall in a few days if he could stay at school during the summer vacation. However, a letter dispelled this arrangement. It was a letter from Augusta Longbottom. Anjuin clearly remembered this stern and kind old lady. In the letter, Augusta invited Anjuin to visit her home and said that it would be even better if he could live there for a while. Anjuin thought that spending the summer vacation at the Longbottoms' house seemed like a good idea. Anjuin immediately replied to Mrs. Longbottom, expressing his gratitude for her invitation and saying that he was happy to spend the holiday there. Augusta's reply was quick. She happily expressed her welcome and informed Anjuin of her address. Since she had to take care of little Neville alone, and the Longbottom couple needed to work at the Ministry of Magic, Anjuin needed to go to the Longbottoms' house by himself. After deciding on the destination for the holiday, Anjuin began to prepare gifts for the visit. After all, it would not be polite to arrive empty-handed. Anjuin spent 50 galleons to ask Hagrid to buy him a whole leg of spotted boar ham and 2 bottles of Ogden's Old Fire whiskey, and took out 4 bottles of Euphoria elixir that he had left over before, wrapped them in gift boxes, and prepared them as gifts for the visit. And the boring time always passed quickly, and the second half of the school year soon came to an end. Anjuin achieved 5 exceeds expectations and 2 outstandings in the 7 subjects of the final exam. The 2 courses that did not reach exceeds expectations were History of Magic and Astronomy. Anjuin basically only kept up with the progress in these 2 courses, and most of the time was spent practicing spells and studying runes. Under Anjuin's efforts to give Vivian extra tutoring for a week, she finally passed all the courses, and even got an exceeds expectations in History of Magic. Sure enough, everyone has their own strengths. As Professor McGonagall revealed before, the content of the Transfiguration exam was indeed to transform a mouse into a snuff box. Anjuin couldn't understand how someone could fail this kind of situation where they knew the exam questions in advance. After the end of the final exam, Hogwarts held a farewell party, which was the end of term banquet, on the day before the end of the semester. At the banquet, Professor Dumbledore announced the ownership of the House Cup for this academic year. Unsurprisingly, Ravenclaw successfully won the House Cup this year. Slytherin and Gryffindor fought fiercely this academic year, and the scores on both sides were deducted to almost the bottom. Vanessa was very anxious about this, but based on the current situation of Slytherin, Anjuin estimated that it was very likely that she would not be able to touch the House Cup once in her 7 years of school. In this great hall full of blue flags, Anjuin spent his first academic year not very calmly. Chapter 72. After several hours of bumpy travel, Anjuin stepped off the steam train and, as usual, bid farewell to Vivian and Charles before taking out Augusta's letter to examine it. Read. Ottery St. Catchpole? I guess I'll take the night business. Anjuin looked at the address on the letter and decided after thinking for a moment. Leaving the train station, Anjuin found a street with few people and raised his wand. Before long, a purple triple-decker bus screeched to a halt in front of Anjuin in a rather violent manner. Anjuin looked at the behemoth in front of him, guessing that this journey wouldn't be too comfortable. Ottery St. Catchpole. Anjuin, who had just gotten off the bus, swayed unsteadily, taking a while to regain his balance. This trip had really taken a toll on him. The bus had been swerving and bumping the whole way, and then there was the violent sudden stop at the station. Anjuin even admired the ticket seller on the bus, who could stay on it all day without throwing up. Following the address of the Longbottoms' house, Anjuin quickly found the place. Anjuin, we've been waiting for you. It's been half a year since we last saw you at Christmas. Look at you, your hair's gotten so long. Augusta, wearing an apron and holding a soup ladle in one hand, looked at Anjuin at the door with a smile. Anjuin hadn't cut his hair at all this school year, and now his long hair was draped over his shoulders. His style was like Sirius except for his pure black hair color. I should be thanking you for the invitation. I can't contact Sirius and the Potters. If you hadn't taken me in, I would have had to spend this summer at the Leaky Cauldron. Anjuin said very sincerely to Augusta. Don't say that. You're not only our friend, but also our comrade. Have you forgotten? Having you here to keep me company this summer won't be too boring. Don't just stand there, come in. Augusta quickly pulled Anjuin into the house. As soon as he entered, he smelled a rich aroma. Wait here for a moment, dinner will be ready soon. Frank and Alice will be back soon too. You can keep Neville company for me, I don't know if he remembers you. With that, Augusta walked quickly into the kitchen. Smiling and nodding, Anjuin stayed in the living room, taking in the Longbottoms' house. The Longbottoms' house was distinctly different from the Potter's house. The interior of the Potter's house was cozy and simple, while the Longbottoms' house had more of a sense of history. The surrounding wooden furniture was heavy and sturdy, looking like it had been passed down for several generations. The carpets and decorations had a distinct aristocratic style. Some landscapes and portraits were hung on the walls, and some utensils that looked like antiques were placed in the living room. There were even some small animal specimens in a display cabinet, and a hat rack next to it was displaying a valuable decorative hat with a vulture specimen standing on it. What a peculiar taste, Anjuin thought, This definitely wasn't Alice's style. On a crib next to the fireplace in the hall, Neville was lying bored. Suddenly, the face of a long-haired man appeared in his eyes. Startled, Neville was about to burst into tears, but he found that the face in front of him looked a little familiar. He stopped crying and stared at Anjuin with his round eyes. Anjuin saw that Neville was about to cry when he saw him, but he was also a little curious, and couldn't help but find it funny. So he smiled happily, gently pinched Neville's little hand, and said, "Little Neville, do you remember me? We once fought off the Death Eaters together." Neville, who was just a little curious, was frightened by Anjuin's teasing and cried loudly, leaving Anjuin awkwardly frozen aside. Okay, I won't tease you, why are you crying so hard?" Anjuin said to himself helplessly. Neville's crying alarmed Augusta in the kitchen. The old woman ran out of the inner room, and when she saw that Neville was okay, she coaxed little Neville with Anjuin, and then ran back to the kitchen to get busy. Anjuin just waited aside, staring at Neville, not daring to touch him, for fear of scaring him into crying again. Before long, the door opened, and the Longbottom couple returned. Frank and Alice, who came in, saw Anjuin standing next to Neville, and couldn't help but step forward to greet him happily. "Anjuin, long time no see. My mother said at first that you would come to our house for the holidays. I didn't believe it at first. It's really good that you can come. Alice and I are busy every day. Now there's someone who can keep my mother company, so she doesn't have to nag us every day." Frank stretched and greeted Anjuin excitedly, as if he was a savior. "Hello, Frank, Alice, old Madame Longbottom is very friendly to me, and I am also very grateful that you can invite me." Anjuin greeted the two politely. "Humph, I just heard someone say bad things about me. Dinner is ready, what are you still doing here?" Augusta said to the two with a straight face again. Okay, I know I was wrong, Mom, don't you see there's a guest here?" Frank was startled when he heard Augusta's voice, and quickly apologized to his mother, then turned back and stuck his tongue out at Anjuin secretly. Anjuin thought this family was very interesting. Augusta was a serious mother, but he could feel her deep love for her family. Just from the dinner that smelled so good, you knew it was great, only with heart can you weave real deliciousness. Anjuin ate his first meal of the summer at the Longbottoms' house. The dinner was very rich. Seeing Frank and Alice's natural appearance, it should be so rich every day. Augusta ate very quickly, and after dinner, she was busy feeding little Neville. It could be seen that she was very attentive to her little grandson. After dinner, Anjuin took out the prepared gifts from his space bag. The Longbottom family was very reluctant at first, but with Anjuin's insistence, Augusta accepted it, and hurriedly took the ham that was thicker than a cow's leg to the storage room to put it away, while Frank smiled and opened a bottle of Ogden's Old Fire whiskey, poured himself a small glass, and secretly tasted it in the living room. Anjuin found it funny to see him looking so wretched, like a bear kid who was afraid of being caught by his parents for secretly drinking alcohol. Anjuin and the Longbottom couple returned to the living room. Alice was holding little Neville, and Frank was holding a glass of wine, sipping it in small sips, and chatting happily with Anjuin. "So, how was your first year at Hogwarts? Did you often get caught by Professor McGonagall? I remember she used to like to make trouble for us and give us detention," Frank said. Chapter 73. Anjuin laughed. "Professor McGonagall takes good care of me. It's those Gryffindors and Slytherins who are always causing trouble that often make the professor angry. Humph, it must be those damned Slytherins who are stirring up trouble." As he said that, Frank suddenly realized that Anjuin seemed to be in Slytherin too, and quickly added, "I mean those Slytherins who are always boasting about pure blood supremacy. There are still quite a few Slytherins who are well behaved." Anjuin didn't mind, and said, "I agree with you on that point. A few pure blood students did give me trouble before, but I took care of them easily." Frank got excited when he heard that. "Then you can learn a trick from Sirius and James. They have a head-down suspension curse that can hang people upside down. It was so much fun when we were in school. I'm not that childish. Isn't it better to solve enemies cleanly and neatly?" Anjuin thought, then thought of something else, and said, "He couldn't wait to teach me that spell before. By the way, is Sirius in some kind of trouble? I can't seem to get in touch with him, and Lily and James too. The owl I sent with letters always can't find the place." Alice and Frank frowned slightly when they heard Anjuin's words and exchanged glances. Alice thought for a while and then said, "Dumbledore believes that Lily and James are currently facing danger, so he has hidden them. It's normal that you can't find them. We can't contact them either. As for Sirius, Frank continued, he is currently in hiding. Many Death Eaters can't find Lily and James, so they want to find him, probably trying to find out where Lily and James are hiding from him. But don't worry, he's not fighting alone. Anjuin nodded, it seemed to be about what he had thought before. All right, it's getting late. You should go to rest quickly. Frank, take Anjuin to the guest room, the one at the end of the corridor. I've already cleaned it up in advance. Anjuin, you're too kind. I don't think I can finish that ham in a month. Augusta put away the ham and tidied up the dining room and kitchen before coming to the living room and saying to everyone. After speaking, she sniffed the air, and then her face turned furious. Frank, you've been sneaking alcohol again, haven't you? Don't you know you have to go to work tomorrow? Frank shrank his head, smiled sheepishly, and then quickly pulled Anjuin upstairs. Alice held Neville and snickered to the side. Augusta was furious and couldn't help but glare at her. Anjuin settled down in the Longbottoms' home, which had such a family atmosphere. He still maintained extremely self-disciplined living habits, exercising regularly in the morning and evening, studying runes and practicing occlumency at night, and spending most of his time during the day helping Augusta with chores. Augusta was a stern woman, but she was very fond of Anjuin, this sensible and self-disciplined young man. Moreover, Anjuin was also a good cook. The Longbottom couple were both aurors in the Ministry of Magic, and they usually left early and returned late every day. Now, during the war, they sometimes had to work overtime patrolling, or deal with urgent tasks, so they were very busy. Therefore, Anjuin was also willing to spend time with this lonely old woman. Anjuin, Frank, and Alice are off tomorrow. I'm planning to invite the neighbors over as guests, and use the ham you gave me to entertain them. What do you think? Do you have any good ideas for cooking the ham? Augusta was cooking lunch with Anjuin. In the 2 weeks that Anjuin had been staying at the Longbottoms' house, he showed what good cooking skills were. He made almost every dish different every day, making Augusta almost an assistant now. That depends on how many people there are. If there aren't many people, I can make some delicate side dishes, such as boiled cabbage in clear soup, or I can just slice it and serve it with salad. Anjuin replied, looking at the excited Augusta. I'm planning to invite more people this time. There's the Weasley family who live outside the village. Arthur is Frank's colleague, and his wife Molly is also the sister of the Pruitt brothers. You've met those brothers. They have a lot of children. Molly is still pregnant now. It's hard to imagine her having to take care of so many people. There's also the Diggory family who work in the Ministry of Magic, and the Xenophilius Lovegood family who edit the Quibbler. That guy is a bit weird, but it would be bad not to invite them as neighbors. Augusta recited the names while counting on her fingers. When Anjuin heard that there were so many people, he couldn't help but feel a headache, and most of them were children. After thinking about it, he said, I understand. There are a total of 6 adults and 8 children, right? 2 of the children are infants, and the remaining 6 are under 10 years old. 1 is a pregnant woman. Anjuin pondered the composition of the personnel, then took out a piece of parchment, neatly wrote the menu, and said, there are pregnant women and children, so you can't make dishes with alcohol. Children generally prefer fried and sweet and sour flavors, so make some braised pork, sweet and sour pork ribs, fried chicken wings, and fried squid rings. Anjuin said as he scribbled on the paper, continuing, for the ham, I will cut it into small pieces, and add shrimp, scallops, peas, fresh bamboo shoots, and eggs to make a fried rice. This way, the quantity is relatively large, and it can be made into a buffet-style staple food, which is also more convenient. Then, slice some ham and serve it with salad and cheese as a cold dish, and then cut some lean ham and serve it with corn to make a ham and corn chowder. I also have some dried mushrooms here, so I can make a chicken and mushroom stew. You also have some lamb chops in your storage room, so we can use them to make a baked lamb chop with pistachio crumbs. I'll also mix some sauces, prepare some cucumbers, kelp, and fungus, and pour them on top to make cold dishes. You can prepare some desserts and bread, in case someone doesn't like rice. That should be enough, right? You can set up long tables in the yard and make it buffet style, lined up next to each other. They can take whatever they like. This is more suitable for occasions with more children, and it also saves time. What do you think? Augusta looked at Anjuin in surprise as he wrote and drew, and prepared the menu in no time, as well as the style of the banquet, etc., considering everything very carefully. Originally, she just wanted to hear Anjuan's suggestions on cooking ham, but he ended up arranging everything. You've considered everything very carefully. Let's do it according to what you said. I'm suddenly very much looking forward to tomorrow's luncheon. What other opinions could Augusta have? Listening to the menu that Anjuan read out, her saliva was almost drooling, not to mention the guests. Chapter 74. With the menu decided, Anjuan and Augusta began preparing the ingredients in the afternoon. Augusta also took out some exquisite ceramic tableware, large silver-plated utensils needed for the buffet, and so on. The next morning, Anjuan and Augusta started preparing the ingredients early. Augusta continuously used cooking magic to mix the dough, as she was responsible for baking the bread, desserts, fruit juices, and other items for the upcoming luncheon. At the same time, Anjuan controlled 3 cutting boards, meticulously processing pork, chicken, lamb chops, ham, and so on, categorizing all the necessary meats, vegetables, seasonings, and ingredients, preparing them one by one, so they could be quickly accessed later. Frank and Alice rarely had a vacation, and they were very excited to hear about hosting a banquet. They also helped set up tables and chairs in the yard and cast spells around the area, releasing a number of Muggle-repelling charms and shielding charms. Although many wizards lived in this village, there were also many Muggles, and they didn't want to be disturbed. Just as Anjuan turned on the 4-eyed stove, prioritizing cooking dishes like chicken stew with mushrooms and braised pork, which required a lot of time, the first guest arrived. The first to arrive was the Diggory family, Amos Diggory and his wife, along with their nearly 4-year-old child, Cedric Diggory. Hearing the conversation in the living room, Anjuan walked to the kitchen door and peeked out. The Diggory couple looked like an ordinary couple, slightly plump, while Cedric stayed obediently by his parents' side, curiously looking around. Seeing Anjuan looking at him, he couldn't help but blush shyly and smiled at Anjuan. Anjuan returned a smile to little Cedric before returning to the kitchen to work. The aroma of the 2 elaborate dishes already filled the air. Anjuan also began to cook other fried dishes, such as sweet and sour pork, fried chicken wings, and onion rings. Just then, the second wave of guests from the Longbottom family arrived, turning the living room into a bustling market with a bunch of children shouting and making noise. Anjuan guessed it must be the Weasley family, but he was busy frying things and didn't go to the door to check. Unexpectedly, instead of him going out, someone barged in. A pair of twins, who looked to be 3 or 4 years old, with fiery red hair, ran into the kitchen, shouting as they ran. Anjuan couldn't stand the mischief of naughty children, and he was operating the oil pan. He didn't want hot oil to splash on the children, or he wouldn't be able to explain himself. As if hearing his thoughts, the 2 naughty children rushed straight towards him. "Ah, it smells so good. George, can you smell it?" "You're George, I'm Fred, you idiot." The 2 naughty children ran to Anjuan's feet, constantly tiptoeing to see the view on the stove. "Don't stay here, you'll get burned. You can taste the delicious food when dinner is ready." Anjuan couldn't stand these 2 guys running around his feet, so he had to find a way to drive them away. "I won't. You're only a little taller than my oldest brother, why should I listen to you?" One of the naughty children said in a childish voice. "That's right, unless you hold me up to see what's so fragrant, even more fragrant than Mom's cooking." The other naughty child chimed in. "You're lying. No one cooks better than Mom. Your nose must be broken." Before Anjuan could answer, the child who spoke earlier interrupted his little brother. "Your nose is broken. Not only is your nose broken, but your ears are also broken." The scolded naughty child retorted unhappily. As a result, before Anjuan could lose his temper, the 2 naughty children started arguing, and it looked like they were about to fight. Just as Anjuan was annoyed by these 2 guys, another child walked in, with the same red hair, looking 2 or 3 years older than the twins, and much more polite. "George, Fred, Mom is calling you to come out, don't disturb others here," their brother reprimanded. Seeing that someone had finally come to save him, Anjuan exclaimed, "Thank goodness." "Blia!" The 2 naughty children stuck out their tongues at their brother and shouted in unison, "No way, crybaby Percy, come and catch us." The twin naughty children ignored their brother and instead circled the marble countertop in the middle of the kitchen. Percy, annoyed by these 2 guys, chased after them. Seeing that these little devils completely disregarded him, Anjuan's anger soared, but just as he was about to explode, he was interrupted by another person who came in. This one looked much older than the three little devils in the kitchen, about 10 years old, with the same fiery red hair, but looked much more stable. Seeing his oldest brother coming, Percy quickly cried out aggrievedly, "Bill, look at these two, they don't listen at all and they're scolding me." "Liar, you were mean to us first. Percy only knows how to tattle," the twins retorted in unison. Bill, who had just entered, took 3 steps and grabbed the 2 naughty children, not talking to them, but instead apologizing to Anjuin. "I'm sorry, my younger brothers are disturbing you." Seeing that someone had finally come to deal with these guys, Anjuin said, "It's nothing, but the kitchen is dangerous, it's better not to let them run around here, they might get hurt." Bill nodded apologetically to Anjuin, then glanced at George and Fred, ignoring their shouts, and dragged them out. The world was finally quiet. Anjuin finally breathed a sigh of relief, but he also witnessed how chaotic a large family with many children could be. These little brats had all kinds of personalities, and he really admired the Weasley couple for being able to manage this large family. After returning to peace again, Anjuin finally calmed down and cooked most of the food. Augusta, who had gone out to entertain the guests, also returned to the kitchen, checking the desserts in the oven. At this time, the last wave of guests finally arrived. Anjuin, who was almost finished, also walked to the kitchen door to see what the Lovegood family, described by Augusta as strange, was like. Xenophilius Lovegood looked very artistic, with a head of loose white hair draped over his shoulders, wearing a bright yellow robe, and a gold chain around his neck with a triangular pendant. Mrs. Lovegood was holding a baby, wearing a light blue robe, looking very scholarly. Chapter 75. Those two definitely look like Ravenclaws, Anjuin thought to himself. No wonder Augusta had such an evaluation. Ravenclaws sometimes act a bit self-centered, and some even call them eccentric. Anjuin, however, had a good impression of the two. After all, he had once thought he would be sorted into Ravenclaw, because he also had a lot of scholarly aura about him. The Longbottom couple kept exchanging greetings with everyone and invited them to rest in the courtyard. The weather was nice that day, with rare bright sunshine. Everyone drank beverages in the courtyard, chatting about topics of interest, and a group of children also played with each other, creating a harmonious scene. In the kitchen, Anjuin wiped away sweat, finally preparing all the food. He used magic to control all the food, loading it into the prepared large porcelain tableware. Then all the tableware floated in a row, orderly following behind Anjuin, and came to the courtyard. Anjuin controlled all the tableware, placing it into the metal holders on the dining table, and then covered each one with a lid. Everything was ready. Augusta, sitting at the long dining table, tapped her wine glass and said, "Welcome everyone to the Longbottom family gathering today, and thank you to Anjuin for providing us with so much delicious food. Now let's all enjoy lunch to the fullest, and don't hesitate to eat whatever you want." To summarize Augusta's words, Anjuin would say, "Eat and drink well, and enjoy yourselves." Augusta brought the family banquet to a climax. All the bear children rushed to the dining table at the first opportunity. Anjuin couldn't help but find it funny looking at this group of red-haired little devils. A wealthy pregnant woman next to him walked towards him and said, "Anjuin, I heard my 2 older brothers mention you. I didn't expect you to have such good cooking skills. I smelled the aroma coming from the kitchen as soon as I entered. You're too kind, Mrs. Weasley. I have to say, you are truly amazing to be able to take care of such a large family," Anjuin said politely. "Just call me Molly. You don't know how much effort it takes to cook for so many people every day," Molly Weasley said. Arthur Weasley, holding a child about the same size as Neville, also chimed in, "Anjuin, although this is our first time meeting, I've heard about you from Moody and Kingsley. I heard you also helped them repel Death Eaters, is that true?" The couple's focus was completely different. Anjuin could only talk to them, one sentence after another, feeling a headache coming on. And the children had also taken their meals, each carrying a full plate towards the long table. Anjuin then said to the Weasley couple, "Why don't you two get something to eat first? We can chat while we eat." The Weasley couple happily agreed. Arthur entrusted 1-year-old Ron to Anjuin's care, and happily chose food while patting his stomach. Anjuin held the red-haired little Ron. Little Ron looked like he had been well nourished since he was young, and his body was very strong, but his expression looked a bit simple and not very clever. The guests who came to the Longbottoms' home sat around the long table, happily savoring the food on their plates. The Diggory couple always looked cheerful, while the Lovegood family was a bit reserved, seeming not very good at socializing. They couldn't quite interject into the topics everyone was chatting about. The Weasley family, on the other hand, was lively. Arthur tasted the food with a smile, and Molly had to watch the children while eating, but her eldest son Bill and second son Charlie were already able to help her out a bit. Only the twin brothers were restless for a moment. However, everyone had one thing in common, and that was that all the guests praised the food, including all the children, several of whom ate with their faces covered in grease, including the shy Cedric. After learning that almost all the food was made by Anjuin, everyone generously offered their praise and greeted Anjuin. "So, how exactly is this chicken and mushroom soup made? It smells fragrant, and it tastes even better." Molly was greatly surprised after tasting Anjuin's cooking. It was a completely new taste that she had never experienced before, with no taste of cheese or butter at all, so she kept asking Anjuin about the recipe. Anjuin humbly exchanged cooking tips with Mrs. Weasley. Before long, Molly and Anjuin were like close friends despite their age difference. "Brother Anjuin, can you come to our house to play often? When will you come to our house and cook for us too?" 8-year-old Charlie Weasley, holding a chicken wing in both hands, said innocently. "If there's a chance, of course, no problem, as long as you don't mind," Anjuin said frankly. "Really? Our whole family would welcome you," Arthur said excitedly, his mouth full of grease. In this way, Anjuin and the Weasley family formed a friendship through food. The lunch banquet was a scene of enjoyment for both hosts and guests. After lunch, everyone gathered together to drink afternoon tea, and the children played in the courtyard. Mr. Lovegood next to him approached Anjuin and said, "Young man, thank you for your hospitality. My wife is extremely happy today. Even Luna can feel her mother's mood, so she has been smiling." Anjuin said with a smile, "You're too kind, Mr. Lovegood. I'm very happy that you like the food. We all like it very much, and Luna likes it too. Although she can't eat it yet, you can tell she likes it," Lovegood said. Although he didn't know how he came to that conclusion, Anjuin still said politely, "I'm very happy that your daughter likes it. I heard that you are the editor of a magazine, so you must be very busy usually." Lovegood looked very excited when he heard Anjuin say this, and said, "Yes, have you heard of the magazine The Quibbler? They are the only magazine that is willing to publish articles about Crumplehorn Snorkax, and also Nargles, Flutterby Bush Babies. Other magazines only hide the truth, they are all made up of a bunch of liars." Anjuin couldn't help but click his tongue inwardly when he saw him so blatantly criticizing his peers. Anjuin discovered that this Mr. Lovegood spoke very directly, completely unaware of what tact meant. "May you not be troubled by dirigible plums. Pandora is calling me. Forgive me for excusing myself for a while. Maybe one day you can publish some recipes in our magazine, I believe it will be very popular," Lovegood said to Anjuin with a smile, and then got up and left. Anjuin didn't quite understand Mr. Lovegood's words, but he could tell that he wasn't a bad person, just that his thinking wasn't on the same level as others. Chapter 76. After several exchanges with visiting neighbors and friends, Anjuin also gained some impressions of these wizarding friends. Mr. Lovegood had whimsical ideas but was very innocent and unbelievably straightforward. Mrs. Lovegood was a charm scholar who had also tried to research and develop some spells. Read. The Diggory family was very honest and behaved like a friendly neighborhood couple. The Weasley family invited Anjuin to visit them before school started. Partly, Molly felt a connection with Anjuin, and partly because of the Pruitt brothers. Of course, Anjuin thought the main reason was that the whole family was greedy. Mr. Weasley was very interested in him after learning that he was a Muggle-born wizard. He had an extraordinary curiosity about the Muggle world, perhaps because he worked in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office. His department was mainly responsible for dealing with wizards who misused magic on Muggle objects, but Anjuin thought Mr. Weasley was likely to take advantage of his position to test the limits himself. The pleasant gathering time passed quickly. The guests contentedly bid farewell to the Longbottom family and Anjuin. The Longbottoms were also very satisfied with this vacation, their faces full of smiles. The food Anjuin made was almost completely devoured, and old Mrs. Longbottom also felt very proud, constantly praising Anjuin's good cooking. After the Longbottoms finished their vacation, they resumed their intense Auror work. Recently, the Death Eaters had gradually begun to become active again. Whether it was torturing and killing Muggles or ambushing and injuring wizards or Aurors, related cases came one after another, without any sign of stopping, causing the Auror headquarters a great headache. Anjuin didn't understand this very well. The main job of the Aurors was just to patrol various wizarding gathering places, including Diagon Alley, Hogsmeade, etc. There were also patrols around Ottery St. Catchpole, the village where Anjuin lived, but there was no corresponding alarm feedback system. If there was a wizard attack, they could only passively wait for rescue, or resist or run away. Many wizards were attacked, and the Aurors were often one step late. Moreover, their tracking methods were extremely lacking, basically relying on reports or gathering intelligence through visits, etc. In his spare time, Anjuin also discussed the Aurors' work with the Longbottoms. They said that the Ministry of Magic possessed a powerful detection array that could cover the entire United Kingdom, located in the Ministry of Magic's Misuse of Magic office. Usually, the Aurors were divided into two parts, one part going out on patrol, and the other part staying on standby at headquarters, partly to protect the headquarters, and partly to maintain mobility. However, the array detection had a delay, and it was difficult to pinpoint the specific person. For example, in the Longbottom's house, when Anjuin cast a spell, the Ministry of Magic could not determine exactly who cast the spell. Therefore, although the entire United Kingdom was covered by detection, many people cast spells every day, and they also had to assign people to monitor traces of underage wizards casting spells. Only when there was a high energy reaction, or a surge of unforgivable curses in an area, would the mobile force appear. Some Death Eater's spell casting intensity when attacking wizards was not high, so the Ministry of Magic would miss it, and then they could only wait for the wizards who escaped or were injured to report to the Ministry of Magic, otherwise the Ministry of Magic would not even know that there had been a fight. Of course, now the Ministry of Magic had increased its monitoring efforts, and Aurors would go to investigate slightly frequent spell casting. Moreover, their timely communication speed was not fast. They mainly relied on the advanced application of the Patroness charm, which could quickly find the corresponding wizard and transmit information. However, many Aurors did not even know this advanced technique, so the more effective method was to apparate to transmit information. This also led to the fact that the most important thing in leading this war was intelligence, but there were forces within the Ministry of Magic itself that supported the Dark Lord. They would pass aura intelligence to the Death Eaters, which led to the current Ministry of Magic basically being in a situation where the enemy was in the dark and they were in the light. So that's why there's the Order of the Phoenix? No wonder so many Aurors have joined the Order of the Phoenix. Faced with such a situation, it is indeed necessary to establish an organization whose actions are not exposed to the Ministry of Magic's view to resist. But this also could not avoid the problem of the Aurors and the Order of the Phoenix being inefficient. It was like in a feudal society, where cases could only be dealt with and the murderer caught after the fact, even though they possessed so many convenient and efficient supernatural means. The Death Eaters could use the Dark Mark for some simple communication, and the Dark Lord could also use the Dark Mark to summon or give orders to the Death Eaters, but the Aurors' communication and alert methods were too few. If all wizards had an alarm device or alarm spell, if they could quickly notify the Auror office when attacked, the number of attacks would be greatly reduced, and support would be more timely. At the same time, Anjuin also learned that there was a hit wizard unit in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. They had higher authority than ordinary Aurors, but they also shouldered more dangerous tasks. Their work was often assigned to the front lines of fighting crime. Some hit wizards were also Aurors, but not all Aurors were hit wizards. For example, Mad Eye Moody was the captain of a hit wizard squad and also responsible for Auror work. In Anjuin's view, Aurors were like ordinary police, while hit wizards were more like armed police. However, perhaps because these wizards had not experienced much combat in their daily lives, in his opinion, these Aurors' battlefield literacy really needed to be improved. When a battle occurred, they basically rushed up and threw spells without any coordination at all, basically each acting on their own. At the same time, Anjuin also learned about a position called Roving Hit Wizard. No, it wasn't even a proper position. Anyway, there was no such official position in the Ministry of Magic. Their work was somewhat similar to bounty hunters. They didn't have a salary, but after capturing dark wizards or criminal wizards, they could submit them to the Ministry of Magic and earn a bounty. They could even specialize in hunting down criminals with high bounties. The Ministry of Magic would symbolically give these bounty wizards a Roving Hit Wizard certificate. However, Roving Hit Wizards did not have corresponding official authority. The only useful thing was that they could use this certificate to carry out bounty hunting abroad. Foreign ministries of magic also recognized it, and then they could receive bounties from foreign ministries of magic. However, if these roving hit wizards violated the laws of the local Ministry of Magic, they could even be arrested. Almost no one did this life-risking business now, but it was very convenient to apply for, and could even be done as a part-time job. According to Frank, Sirius had applied for this certificate. He used to think it was cool, but he threw the certificate away not long after, and described this profession as only wasting the Ministry of Magic's paper, because even if you weren't a roving hit wizard, you would still get a bounty from the Ministry of Magic after capturing a dark wizard. It was like taking off your pants to fart, superfluous, unless you wanted to enforce the law abroad, otherwise there was no need to attach another layer of official proof. Chapter 77. Anjuin was quite interested in this. In his plan, after graduating from Hogwarts, he wanted to go out and see the world, maybe take a magical trip around the countries. If he could get such a certificate, he could earn some extra money if he encountered dark wizards in other countries. Read. So Anjuin also inquired about the application method for this identity from Frank, and then found that this certificate was issued really casually, as long as you submit an application to the International Magical Cooperation Department, as long as you don't have a criminal record, basically anyone can apply successfully. As for why apply to the International Magical Cooperation Department instead of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, it is because this profession first appeared in the Magical Congress of the United States, and then the International Confederation of Wizards also recognized this profession, so it spread to various countries. After all, it can help the magical departments of various countries relieve the pressure of crime, of course, if it causes damage to the local area during the pursuit, it will also be arrested and repatriated by the magical departments of various countries. After learning some inside information about the Ministry of Magic and the Aurors, Anjuin was very worried about the current situation. The information on both sides was completely unequal. If this world is not like the vague memory in his previous life, where the Dark Lord attacks Harry and is killed, it may fall into a protracted war. Anjuin didn't know whether Dumbledore's protection of the Lily family would change history, but assuming it really changed history, then the magical world might not be very peaceful for a long time to come. Anjuin didn't want this kind of life without security. If he wanted to change all of this, he could only become stronger at all costs. Therefore, in the following days, his spirit became tense again. Spell development, spell practice, occlumency training, plus daily exercise and training, the urgency about safety made Anjuin not relax at all. Augusta didn't know what was wrong with Anjuin. Except for going downstairs to help with cooking before returning, and helping Augusta take care of the children when she went out, he spent all the rest of his time in his room. This kind of life had passed for more than a month. On August 9, 1981, when Anjuin was helping with cooking, Augusta brought him a message. An invitation from the Weasley family? Sorry, I almost forgot. Anjuin has been a little nervous recently, and the spell development has reached a critical moment, so he forgot about it completely. Augusta smiled and said, Yes, I happened to meet Molly yesterday. She also expects you to teach her some recipes. She will be giving birth in a while, and recently many fruits in their orchard have ripened, and they want to invite us to be guests. Although I don't know why you are so busy and nervous every day, combining work and rest is the best. Anjuin nodded, feeling that he seemed to have been pushing himself too hard recently. The unknown danger made him a little neurotic. It was also necessary to relax properly. So he nodded and said, Okay, then we will visit the Weasley family tomorrow. The next day, Anjuin held little Neville and accompanied Augusta to the burrow where the Weasley family lived. It was located in the outer suburbs of Ottery St. Catchpole. The Weasley family had cast a wide range of Muggle-repelling charms and shield charms there to prevent Muggles from disturbing them. As they approached their destination, Anjuin saw from a distance a house pieced together like building blocks, several stories high. In Muggle society, this kind of house could not be built at all, and it would collapse in minutes. That was the burrow where the Weasley family lived. In front of the burrow was a small yard, which looked like there was a chicken coop. In addition, there was a warehouse like a garage outside. The surrounding scenery was beautiful, making it a good place to live. As soon as Anjuin and Augusta approached, the Weasley family spotted them. Several little guys poked their heads out of the windows above and greeted them. Arthur also heard the noise and opened the front door early to welcome the guests. Haha, if you hadn't come to visit, Molly would have given birth, and we wouldn't have had time to entertain you then. Arthur let out a hearty laugh, greeting the two. Anjuin said apologetically, Sorry, it's my fault. I've been obsessed with learning and research for the past few days and forgot about it. It's great that you are so motivated at such a young age. If only my children could be like you. Come in quickly, Molly has been busy in the kitchen for a long time. Arthur said with a happy expression. Then Arthur led the two into the house, while constantly nagging to the two, Bill will be 11 years old after his birthday in November this year. It's a pity that he can't make it to Hogwarts this year, so he has to wait another year. The fruits are growing very well this year, the grapes and plums are so sweet, you must taste them. Anjuin and Augusta followed Arthur to sit down in the living room, tasting the fruits they had prepared early. The children also came downstairs one after another, chattering around a few people. Bill held his youngest brother Ron, and helped out very sensibly. Molly, who was busy in the kitchen, also heard the noise and ran out to greet the two, and then hurriedly pulled Anjuin away. She was going to learn a few recipes from Anjuin. Anjuin had a very good impression of this hard-working mother, and exchanged enthusiastically. He demonstrated the methods of several dishes he had made before in the kitchen. Although Molly was pregnant, she still flexibly cast cooking spells, and completed several dishes with Anjuin with extremely high talent. Families with many children are prone to chaos. While Molly was focused on cooking, she still had the energy to yell at the naughty children who were causing trouble outside. Every time Molly yelled, the noise in the living room would stop, but after a while, the sound of things colliding or children scolding and crying would come from the living room, and then Molly would yell again, and then instantly suppress the audience. Anjuin was shocked. Did she know who was causing trouble without even looking? In this warm with chaos with harmonious family atmosphere, Anjuin and Molly prepared lunch for everyone together. Then there was a blockbuster of bear children making a scene in the restaurant. The 3-year-old twin brothers were the most naughty. They would snatch the food from their older brothers Percy or Charlie, or scare Ron in Bill's arms, and they had to make him cry. Molly and Bill constantly maintained order at the scene, while Arthur was smiling foolishly as the audience. Anjuin felt that this family was really lively, and the family atmosphere was too strong. Since he came to this world, it was the first time he felt this kind of big family atmosphere, which made him involuntarily fall into memories. Chapter 78. Molly watched Anjuin space out after a few bites and asked in confusion, "What's wrong, Anjuin? Is the food not to your liking?" "No, it's not that. I'm just very envious of your family, it reminds me of some past events." "Reading," Anjuin replied, snapping out of it. "Oh, Merlin's beard, I'd thank my lucky stars if these little rascals could give me a moment's peace one day," Molly said, annoyed, then saw Arthur next to her, focused only on eating. She scolded, "And you don't even think of helping me manage them." Arthur shrugged innocently, gave Molly an apologetic smile, and continued to happily eat. The boisterous lunch soon came to an end. All the little ones were covered in food. Anjuin kindly used cleaning charms to clean them up, like washing the children's hands one by one. "Your magic is really great. I don't remember being able to cast such a fluent cleaning charm at your age," Arthur praised Anjuin. "Just practice hard, it's not as complicated as you think," Anjuin said with a smile. Anjuin and Augusta joined the Weasley family for fruit and tea, chatting and listening to the Wizarding Wireless Network broadcast. This was a very popular radio station in the Wizarding world, currently broadcasting the Wizarding Wireless News Roundup. The children weren't very interested in this, they preferred the Toots, Shoots and Roots talk show and the Magic Time music program, so they all ran out to play in the yard. Wizarding Wireless News is reporting an urgent news bulletin. Just now, a violent explosion occurred in the northern region of Cornwall. The Ministry of Magic suspects that Death Eaters are active in the area, and Ministry Aurors, Hit Wizards, and the Accidental Magic Reversal Squad have been dispatched to investigate. All wizards in the area are advised to pay attention to their personal safety. Please wait for subsequent reports for detailed damage and casualties. An unpleasant message came from the magical radio in the Weasleys' house. "Damn it, these Death Eaters are getting more and more rampant," Arthur said with a frown upon hearing the news broadcast. "There have been more and more of these reports lately. I hope the people there are all right. I remember Marlene McKinnon and her fiancé live near there, I hope they weren't affected," Augusta said worriedly. Anjuin also frowned with concern. An attack in one place, even though people had been sent, was likely already too late. Just as he had analyzed before, the official response was too slow. Now he could only quietly wait for further news. The group listened to the news in the living room for a while, but there were still no follow-up reports from the scene. But just then, a patroness, glowing white, passed through the walls of the burrow. It was a small ferret. Anjuin had seen it before, he remembered it was Frank's patroness. The ferret stopped in front of Augusta, and a voice came from the patroness's light and shadow, "Mum, there's been a murder in Cornwall. The Marlene McKinnon family has been killed." A few miles away, the Pruitt brothers, who were responsible for coming to support, were also ambushed by Death Eaters and sacrificed. Their bodies are now 3 miles north of the McKinnon's house. Moody thinks it's necessary to notify you first, and then help send a message to the Weasley family next door. We know Mrs. Weasley is about to give birth, so please consider whether or not to tell her this bad news. As soon as Anjuin heard the message conveyed by the patroness, he stood up abruptly. Arthur also sat there in a daze. The group looked at each other with solemn expressions, and then suddenly heard the sound of porcelain falling behind them. Only then did the group turn around and see Molly looking at them with a pale face, her hands trembling so badly she couldn't hold anything. She was deeply shocked and looked unsteady, as if she would fall at any moment. Seeing this, Anjuin quickly rushed over, came to Molly's side, and helped her up. Arthur also arrived and together they supported Molly, helping her to sit down on the sofa. The air in the house was heavy and suffocating. Anjuin, Augusta, and Arthur didn't know what to say at this moment, and could only look down at Molly in grief. Anjuin poured a glass of water and handed it to Molly. Only then did Molly's eyes focus, and she grasped the glass with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. Arthur looked at Molly, who was silent but tearful, and could only pat her back consolingly, unable to say anything for a moment. After a while, Molly looked up at her husband and said, "Arthur, please go and see them for me, please, my 2 poor brothers." At this moment, Molly's crying erupted, wailing so loudly it shook the heavens and the earth. The children playing outside heard their mother's cries and hurried in, looking at their mother in confusion, not knowing what had happened. Arthur nodded to Molly, then looked at Augusta and said, "Madam Longbottom, please take care of Molly, she needs you. I have to get to the scene to confirm." Then he turned to Bill and said, "Look after your younger brothers, take care of Mum, I'll be back soon." Anjuin then said, "Mr. Weasley, I'll go with you. They are also my friends." Arthur shook his head and said, "It hasn't been confirmed whether it's safe there yet, so it's best not to go, it's too dangerous." Anjuin insisted, "Don't worry, I can protect myself. With me accompanying you, there will be someone to look after each other." Augusta then said, "Let Anjuin go with you, he is a very opinionated child, and he can give you some ideas when the time comes." Seeing that both of them had said so, Arthur had to nod and say, "All right, then thank you very much, I'll leave this place to you." Anjuin also turned to Augusta and said, "Please try to notify the Diggory family and ask them to come here to help take care of things. I remember you also have patroness messaging, if there is anything urgent, locate me and send me a message." Augusta nodded in agreement. In her eyes, Anjuin was just a child, but he was more reliable than many adult wizards. After making the decision, Arthur took Anjuin outside and said to Anjuin, "I've been to Marlene's house, we'll apparate directly to the scene, grab my hand." Anjuin did as he was told, and Arthur and Anjuin disappeared from the spot. Northern Cornwall, a house in the suburbs here was almost completely destroyed by the explosion. Several Aurors were patrolling the area, and 2 bodies wrapped in white cloth were placed on the ground outside the house. Frank and Alice stood guard beside them with solemn expressions, awaiting orders. Chapter 79. Arthur and Anjuin apparat to a spot not far from here. The Aurors on guard, as a conditioned reflex, pointed their wands at the 2, but after seeing who it was, they breathed a sigh of relief and lowered their wands. Frank and Alice also hurried to greet them when they saw that it was them. Frank said, "You're here. This is Marlene and her fiancé. The Pruitt brothers are in the woods further north. Moody is controlling the scene there. I'll take you over." Anjuin looked at the 2 bodies wrapped on the ground, and the house next to them that had been blown to pieces. He could imagine how fierce the battle here must have been. Alice also looked at the 2 with a sorrowful expression, and said to Arthur, "How's Molly? Did you tell her the news? Frank and I were very conflicted after arriving at the scene. We didn't know if we should pass the message to you immediately." Arthur sighed and said, "Thank you for everything you've done. We were all next to Madame Longbottom at the time. Molly knew the news immediately. Augusta is helping to take care of Molly now. Anjuin and I came to the scene first, after all, it's not very convenient for her now." Hearing this, Alice exchanged a look with her husband, and could imagine how sad Molly would be upon hearing such news. "Frank, take Arthur over there. I have to wait here for the McKinnon's family, Alice said to Frank. Frank nodded, then grabbed Arthur's arm, and Arthur grabbed Anjuin's. The three of them operated away together. Not far north of Marlene McKinnon's house, in a small forest, several Aurors were also on guard around the perimeter. Moody and Barty Crouch, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, were surveying the scene. Gideon Pruitt and Fabian Pruitt were also covered with white cloths on the ground. Frank and the other two operated to the scene, nodding to Moody and the others as a greeting. Anjuin accompanied Arthur to check the bodies. Anjuin noticed that the surrounding trees and ground had traces left after the battle, and the traces of battle extended to the south. Therefore, he judged that the Pruitt brothers were being chased, running from the direction of Marlene's house to here. In other words, it was possible that the Pruitt brothers provided support to Marlene's house at the first moment, or that the two arrived at the scene just after the Marlene family was murdered, and then were chased to this place in a fierce battle. It seems that there were many opponents. If they had arrived before the Marlene family was murdered, the four of them should have been able to resist for a while. That is to say, at least 4 Death Eaters participated in the attack. At this time, Arthur stepped forward with a solemn expression and uncovered the white cloth, revealing Gideon's pale face. His face was covered with dust, and there were many scars on his face, obviously he had sacrificed after a fierce battle. Barty Crouch, who also looked grief-stricken, said, "I'm very sorry, Arthur, that such a regrettable thing happened today. Gideon and Fabian are both heroes of this war. I hope you can accept our condolences." Arthur looked at the 2 brothers who had been murdered, and finally couldn't help but burst into tears, but he shook his head, stood up and said, "They are our pride. Those damned Death Eaters caused all of this. They will always live in our hearts." Anjuin stared solemnly at the bodies of the 2 Order of the Phoenix members. They had suffered a lot of injuries. This battle lasted for nearly half an hour. If they had time to send a message, this kind of ending would not have happened. Arthur collected the bodies of the 2 in front of many Aurors, and then asked about what had happened. From Moody's mouth, the disaster that happened today was roughly restored. Around noon, a group of Death Eaters attacked the Marlene McKinnon family. At that time, the Marlene family should have supported the corresponding resistance, and sent a message to the Pruitt brothers. They spent Christmas together last year, and the Pruitt brothers gave Marlene a 2-way mirror as a Christmas gift. Later, after the battle at the Potter's house, the Pruitt brothers and Marlene also rushed to support together. Through that 2-way mirror, the Pruitt brothers learned of the crisis of the Marlene family. At that time, they mistakenly did not send an alarm to other members of the Order of the Phoenix, but came directly to support. Moody didn't speculate very clearly about the situation of the Marlene family at that time. It was possible that the Marlene family had already been murdered, or it was possible that they were still resisting. In short, the situation did not improve after the Pruitts arrived. The 2 had been stubbornly resisting the attack, but they were still outnumbered and had to retreat to the north. Slight traces of apparition could be seen on Fabian's body. It should be that the 2 had tried to apparate away, but were interrupted. In the end, the 2 fled to this place, were caught up and executed by several Death Eaters. However, the Ministry of Magic only detected the abnormality about 10 minutes after the Marlene's house was attacked. Although they arrived in time, it was a pity that they didn't have time to support them. When the Hit Wizards and Aurors arrived at the scene, the Pruitt brothers' bodies were still warm, but the Death Eaters had all fled. After learning about the general course of events, Arthur nodded, collected the bodies with a heavy expression, and prepared to take them away for burial. At this time, a young woman dressed as an Auror operated to the crowd and reported to Barty Crouch, "Sir, the McKinnon's family has also arrived at the scene. Alice asked me to notify you." "Okay, thank you, Emily." Barty Crouch nodded to Emily Vance, then turned to Arthur and Anjuin and said, "Sorry, I have to excuse myself. I have to go and comfort Marlene's family." After saying that, Barty Crouch operated away on the spot. Emily Vance, who came here, also greeted Arthur, "I'm very sorry, Arthur, to bring you such news today. The Pruitt brothers have always been our most trusted comrades. I didn't expect." Arthur shook his head silently to Emily, and was about to call Anjuin to leave, but suddenly a white vulture patroness flew to Anjuin. "This is my mother's patroness. Could it be that something happened to Molly?" Frank, who was on the side, recognized his mother's patroness at a glance, and said. Arthur and Anjuin also looked at the patroness nervously, hoping it wasn't bad news. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. The patroness stopped in front of Anjuin and said, "Anjuin, are you and Arthur together? Molly is too sad, her water broke, and she may give birth early. I have hurriedly sent Molly to St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries. Come directly to the hospital to find us when you hear the news. I have asked Mrs. Diggory to take care of the children at the burrow. Chapter 80. Arthur and Anjouan were shocked by the news, and Moody, who was standing by, also knew the seriousness of the matter. He quickly said to Frank, "Frank, go and help. I'll notify Alice. Emily and I will help collect the bodies of the Pruitt brothers. Don't delay." Frank and Arthur nodded quickly upon hearing this, and taking Anjouan, they disapparated from the spot. Emily Vance, who remained in the woods, said worriedly, "Heavens, I hope Molly is all right. So many tragedies have happened today." Arthur and the others operated next to an old-fashioned red brick department store. After explaining their purpose to the mannequins in the department store window, they passed through the glass in front of them and entered St. Mungo's Hospital. They inquired with the receptionist in the waiting room and learned that Molly had just been brought in and was now in a ward on the second floor of the hospital. The three rushed to the second floor. Augusta was anxiously waiting in front of the ward. Neville wasn't with her, presumably entrusted to Mrs. Diggory's care. Seeing the three arrive, Augusta hurried forward to explain the situation. It turned out that after the others left, Augusta had notified Mrs. Diggory, who was at home, and together they went to the burrow to take care of Molly. Molly was still fine at the time, only occasionally shedding tears, but after a while, the heartbroken Molly, who was originally crying, suddenly felt abdominal pain. After Augusta examined her, she discovered that Molly's water had broken, a sign of labor. Mrs. Diggory also panicked at the time, not knowing what to do. However, the decisive Augusta quickly made arrangements. First, she asked Mrs. Diggory to stay and take care of the children, and then she rushed Molly to the hospital. The healers in the emergency department also reacted quickly arranging a ward. Molly is now in the ward receiving treatment. Hearing this, Arthur became even more nervous. He wanted to rush into the ward to see the situation, but he was afraid of affecting the healer's work, so he could only pace anxiously in front of the ward door with a frown. After waiting for some time, the ward door finally opened, and a female healer came out. The others quickly stepped forward to inquire about the situation. The healer took off her mask and said, "The patient's condition has stabilized. She has just drunk a potion, and her physical strength has also recovered, but her water has already broken, so now we can only wait for delivery." Anjouan asked curiously, "Why not do a cesarean section?" "A cesarean section? What's that?" "The patient has recovered some of her strength, but she was too sad before, which led to weakness, so the danger hasn't passed. All we can do is wait." The healer didn't understand what Anjouan was saying, but she still told everyone about the current situation. Anjouan couldn't help but frown. "They don't even know how to do a cesarean section? Are you kidding me? Doesn't that mean the patient can only endure it?" Arthur, who was standing next to him, asked anxiously, "Can I go in and see her? I'm Molly's husband." The healer thought for a moment and agreed to let Arthur go in for a look, but he couldn't stay too long. After Arthur entered the ward, the three people outside had to sit quietly on the long chair in the corridor and wait. Seeing that there was no solution to the situation, Anjouan suggested to Augusta, "It's enough for me to stay here with Mr. Weasley. You and Frank should go back to the burrow to help. Mrs. Diggory alone may not be able to take care of so many children." Frank thought for a moment and said to his mother, "I'll stay here." "Mother, you go back first. I'll send a message to Alice later, and I'll ask her to help you too, so that neither side will be delayed." Augusta thought about it, and she was also a little worried about the burrow. Mrs. Diggory had brought Cedric to the burrow to help. Now with little Neville, there are now 8 children there. Mrs. Diggory can't even cook for them, so she nodded and agreed. After Augusta left, Anjouan and Frank waited for a while, and Arthur finally came out. He told them that Molly was now awake, her physical strength had recovered somewhat, and she seemed to be in good spirits. The only thing now was to wait for delivery, hoping that Molly could hold on. The three of them waited quietly outside the ward, the atmosphere extremely tense. Anjouan couldn't do anything about it. He was a soldier in his previous life, so he knew how to treat emergencies and wounds, but he was at a loss when it came to giving birth. The three of them waited until late at night. Arthur would go into the ward to talk to Molly every once in a while, but the healer required him not to stay too long. Augusta also sent a message saying that Mrs. Diggory and Cedric had gone home after dinner, and Alice had also arrived at the burrow to help, so everything was normal there. As for the hospital, the ward finally made a sound near midnight. The three people in the corridor could clearly hear Molly's painful screams, indicating that she was starting to give birth. Arthur paced back and forth anxiously again, and the frequent footsteps made Arthur's mood even more irritable, while Anjuin and Frank could only wait nervously. This continued for several hours. It was now close to dawn on August 11th. The screams in the ward finally stopped, followed by a burst of loud infant cries. The faces of the people outside the ward finally relaxed, but Arthur immediately became nervous about Molly again. However, after a while, the door of the ward opened, and the female healer came out, telling everyone the good news that the mother and daughter were safe. Looking at Molly holding her daughter, her face full of maternal love and endless grief, Anjuin couldn't help but remain silent. Good news and bad news came one after another, and two complex emotions were constantly intertwined in this ward. In the morning, Alice came to the hospital. She had asked the Auror office for leave for herself and Frank, and the Ministry of Magic had also given Arthur special leave. The Longbottom family was preparing to take turns helping the Weasley family these days. The sudden arrival of bad news, as well as the joy of new life, meant the Weasley family needed more time to digest. In the following days, Anjuin and Augusta basically stayed at the burrow, while Frank and Alice took turns taking care of Molly in the hospital. Anjuin mainly helped to cook for the children in the burrow, and Augusta took care of the daily life of the naughty children. The Weasley children, who were usually itchy for a beating, had been much quieter recently, even somewhat lost. They hadn't seen their mother for several days. Arthur did return to the burrow a few times, bringing everyone and the children some good news. Molly was recovering quickly and should be able to go home soon. It's just that the Weasley family's youngest daughter still needed breast milk, so they couldn't see their little sister right away. Chapter 81. That day, Anjuin, as usual, prepared lunch for the Weasley family, beckoning Bill to help set the table. Now, the Weasley children listened to Anjuin implicitly. Even Bill, who was only a little over a year younger than Anjuin, treated him like an elder. Although he always called Anjuin Big Brother in name, he was as obedient as a baby when Anjuin gave him solo assignments. Reading. Big Brother Anjuin, what delicious food are we having today? Charlie was the greediest of the bunch, always the first to arrive at the table. You'll find out soon enough. Go and call your brothers over quickly. Anjuin used a levitation charm to direct the dishes of food, arranging them in an orderly fashion in front of each person. Augusta and the numerous children successively took their seats at the dining table. The mischievous George, seeing the bright red spare ribs on the plate in front of him, couldn't help but drool and reached out his hand to grab one. Cough, cough. Anjuin coughed lightly twice. George's outstretched hand froze, and he had no choice but to withdraw it sheepishly. Then, he obediently picked up his knife and fork, eating little by little, not daring to speak nonsense or throw food around. During this period, the twins had been completely subdued by Anjuin, not daring to cause any trouble. Whenever they made a mistake, Anjuin would punish them both together, regardless of who was responsible, making them stand in the corner. Now, these two little fellows were incredibly obedient in front of Anjuin. In the middle of lunch, the front door of the burrow was suddenly opened from the outside. The numerous little devils looked at each other, as if realizing something, and scrambled down from the table, rushing towards the door. Anjuin followed the children to the door. Sure enough, it was Molly who had returned. Molly looked to be in good spirits, holding her little daughter in her arms, with her husband Arthur by her side and Frank and Alice accompanying them. Finally, after nearly a week of recuperation, Molly had come home. The numerous children surrounded their mother, some shouting "Mommy" loudly, others hugging Molly's legs and crying. Molly used her face, which couldn't hide her sadness, to comfort her children with a smile. Then, Molly specifically thanked the Longbottom family and Anjuin for their help. Without their assistance, her worries about the children, in addition to her grief, might have overwhelmed the mother once again. The children finished their lunch amidst cheerful laughter, while the adult wizards and Anjuin were thinking about more problems. We're going to name our little daughter Ginevra Molly Weasley, and her nickname will be Ginny, Arthur said to everyone, looking at the newborn child. Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall also came to visit me. They helped us arrange the funerals for my two brothers. I would like to invite you all to attend. Don't worry, I will be strong, even if not for myself, then for Arthur and the children, Molly said to everyone with a smile. Anjuin and the Longbottom family all nodded in agreement. It certainly wouldn't be easy to completely emerge from grief so quickly, but seeing Molly being able to face life strongly, they still felt very gratified. Without disturbing the Weasley family further, they needed to leave them more time and space. After helping to finish lunch that day, Anjuin and the Longbottom family bid farewell to the Weasley family. Anjuin also left the burrow amidst the reluctant calls of the numerous little devils. The group returned to Longbottom Manor and continued their lives, while Dumbledore also invited them to attend the Mackinnon family's funeral. Possibly considering Anjuin's friendship with the members of the Order of the Phoenix, and the fact that he was currently living at the Longbottoms, even Anjuin was invited. Time passed again for a few days. Today was the funeral of the Pruitt brothers and Marlene Mackinnon. Anjuin changed into a dark-colored wizard's robe and accompanied the members of the Longbottom family to the cemetery. Since they had passed away in the same battle, the families of the Pruitt brothers and Marlene had discussed holding a joint funeral and then burying them separately in the cemetery. The group arrived together at a cemetery in southern England. Many people had already arrived ahead of them. The Weasley family was collectively dressed in dark, plain-colored clothing, standing to one side with heavy expressions. Next to them should have been the relatives of Marlene Mackinnon. Anjuin saw Charles, who was also staring blankly with red eyes. After noticing Anjuin, the two nodded to each other tacitly. There were also many acquaintances Anjuin recognized at the scene, such as Emmeline Vance, whom he had met before, as well as Mad-Eye Moody, Edgar Bones, Kingsley Shacklebolt, Barty Crouch, and so on. Anjuin also saw Remus Lupin and Peter Pettigrew. Professor McGonagall and Hagrid had also arrived. They were also members of the Order of the Phoenix, but they usually had to take care of the young wizards at school. He wondered if Sirius Black and the Potter couple would appear. Anjuin hadn't seen them for more than half a year. Seeing the Longbottom family arrive, everyone in the cemetery nodded to the group as a sign of respect. After approaching, they began to converse in low voices with the people who had arrived. Anjuin went to Professor McGonagall and Hagrid first. Hagrid was currently wiping away tears with a small handkerchief. Anjuin, I heard from Arthur about everything you've done for them. Your care and help are gratifying, Professor McGonagall said, nodding at Anjuin as he approached. Anjuin shook his head lightly and said, Mrs. Weasley is a remarkable woman, a great mother, so I'm very happy to be able to help them. I don't know how long it will take them to emerge from their grief. After hearing Anjuin's words, Hagrid cried even more sadly, saying in a choked voice, Oh, Marlene and the Pruitt brothers were such good people. Why was fate so unfair to them? Perhaps death is the beginning of another adventure. What we should do now is not make those who are still alive suffer even more, Anjuin sighed and comforted Hagrid. Those are truly wise words, Anjuin. A voice came from behind Anjuin, but when Anjuin turned around, he found that there was no one there. Just as he was feeling strange, the air seemed to be peeled away, and two familiar figures appeared in front of Anjuin. It was James and Lily. Lily, James, it's been quite a long time since we've heard from you, Anjuin said, a rare smile appearing on his face as he saw his two familiar friends. Lily also smiled slightly and said, We've been staying in a safe place. Dumbledore has been urging us not to easily contact the outside world. We can only occasionally come out using the invisibility cloak. This time, attending the funeral is the same. It's so good to see you again, Anjuin. Chapter 82. I see, Anjuin said, looking at the invisibility cloak in James's hand, with a knowing expression, and then asked curiously, Where's Sirius? Do you have any news about him? Will he be back later? He occasionally comes to visit us. He's one of the few people who know where we live, but we can't contact him. As for whether he'll show up today, we don't know. James shook his head slightly and said to Anjuin. Then James walked towards his two friends, Lupin and Peter, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. Lily also kept greeting the friends around her. Most of them didn't know where the Potters had disappeared to during this time, but they were happy to see them again and came forward to say hello. Soon, Dumbledore and Minister Millicent Bagnold also arrived at the cemetery. After nodding to everyone, they began to preside over the funeral, reciting the eulogy for the deceased. Dear friends, today we have come together to bid farewell to our relatives, friends, comrades in arms, Marlene Mackinnon, Gideon Pruitt, and Fabian Pruitt. They possessed the noblest qualities, kindness, loyalty, and courage. Their deaths have shocked us greatly. They sacrificed themselves to protect the peace and stability of the wizarding world. Their courage is admirable. I firmly believe that their sacrifice will not be in vain. Their sacrifice has further strengthened my determination to fight against the Dark Lord and the Death Eaters. Let us always remember them. Their beliefs will live on in our hearts." Dumbledore's words made everyone present red-eyed, and a sorrowful mood flowed through the cemetery. Molly, who had been very cheerful in recent days, shed tears again. Then, Minister of Magic Millicent Bagnold also expressed her condolences to everyone and said that she would posthumously award the deceased as martyrs. After that, the Weasley and McKinnon families also gave speeches. "I hope they can turn grief into strength," Anjuin couldn't help thinking. During the burial ceremony, Anjuin also came to Charles's side, preparing to comfort his peer friend. However, Charles spoke first. "Anjuin, I know, it must have been Traverse and them. They had threatened us before, and they also threatened my aunt." Charles's eyes were red with grief, but Anjuin could feel more anger in him at this time. "They will get what they deserve. What you should do now is calm down." Anjuin frowned, feeling that Charles's current state was not right, and couldn't help but remind him. "I want to calm down too, but I can't right now. I want to avenge my aunt and them," Charles said bitterly. Then Anjuin said something that surprised Charles very much. Anjuin said calmly, "Then I support your decision. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, it's only natural." Charles was a little surprised after hearing Anjuin's words. In his impression, Anjuin was not the kind of person who would say such a thing. In his impression, Anjuin was always very afraid of trouble, unwilling to cause trouble, and very steady and calm in his actions. Seeing Charles looking at him with a very surprised look, Anjuin said to him, "It's only natural to avenge your family, but if you want to take revenge, you must take revenge thoroughly, and you must ensure your own safety. Don't lose your life before you take revenge." Seeing that Anjuin was seriously giving him advice and so supportive of his decision, Charles nodded firmly. "Well, think long term, don't think you can succeed in a short time, you have to be patient, I will come to you again to discuss it, you go and accompany your family first." After Anjuin calmly finished speaking, he nodded to Charles and turned to leave. The reason why Anjuin supported Charles's extreme idea so much was mainly because he knew that conflicts could not be disintegrated out of thin air. Avoiding them would only make people more aggressive. The easiest way to avoid trouble was to eliminate the source of the trouble. He didn't solve it before because he was still too weak, but Anjuin knew that just because he was a Muggle wizard, he would provoke many enemies out of thin air. "It will take at least a year, Charles, you have to be patient," Anjuin muttered coldly. Anjuin was a very opinionated person, had a clear plan for his future, and had a sober understanding of the wizarding world, but what he knew even more clearly was that people without power were not qualified to dominate their own destiny. After attending the Weasley and McKinnon family funerals, Anjuin began to prepare for the new school year, went to Diagon Alley, bought the school supplies needed for the new school year, and ordered new clothes. Anjuin's body grew very fast, and now he was nearly 1.6 meters tall, and his muscles were more solid. The original school uniform was a little tight to wear. At the same time, he also purchased a lot of potion materials and potion bottles. It's not good to always his Dean and greenhouses. A large number of other seasonings were also replenished. In the last few days before school, Anjuin would occasionally go to the burrow to visit the Weasley family. Currently, Molly's mental state was recovering well, and the burrow had gradually returned to its former joyful scene. The new school year was about to begin soon. Anjuin packed his bags early in the morning, had a hearty breakfast with the Longbottom family, and then went to King's Cross Station with Frank. Frank happened to be in charge of patrolling King's Cross Station today. They had to put up a shielding charm around platform 9 3/4 and drive away the surrounding Muggles. If Muggles accidentally saw wizards crossing the wall, they had to help clear their memories. "I'll send you here. I wish you a happy new school year. If you have nowhere to go this Christmas, our house is still very welcome." Frank and Alice had forged a deep friendship with Anjuin this summer vacation. Anjuin's good cooking completely conquered their stomachs. Anjuin also nodded to Frank and said, "I will seriously consider it. Your work is very dangerous. Don't be brave, and be sure to pay attention to safety." Frank smiled and nodded, bid farewell to Anjuin at the platform, and Anjuin walked alone through the wall between platforms 9 and 10. Seeing the red train spewing thick steam after a long absence, Anjuin couldn't help but feel a little melancholy. Some of the things that happened during this vacation were still vivid in his mind. Walking straight along the train platform, there were already many wizarding men and women who had come to send their children to school. Chapter 83. At that moment, Coincidentally, another group of wizards gathered together, seemingly arguing about something. Reading. Anjuin fixed his eyes and saw that it was the McKinnon family and the Traverse family confronting each other again. Good grief, it's like this every year. However, this time Anjuin didn't watch from afar, but went over. He wanted to take a closer look at the Traverse family. He didn't dare to get too close, and stopped to observe at a distance of 20 meters from the crowd. The adult wizards on both sides of the confrontation didn't pay much attention to this approaching little wizard, but Sample Traverse and Charles noticed him. Charles nodded slightly to Anjuin, while Traverse stared at Anjuin with a gloomy expression. He hadn't forgotten the humiliation he had suffered last school year, but Anjuin was elusive all day long, and he couldn't even block him in the common room. In addition to Sample, there were 3 other people in the Traverse family, one of whom was a very dazzling woman with long golden hair. Next to her should be her husband, Sample's father, with a very conspicuous goatee, but his face was a little pale, and he didn't look very healthy. Behind the 2 was a gloomy guy, with a sinister smile on his mouth, coldly staring at the McKinnon family. The McKinnon family also stared straight at the man behind, cursing him as a murderer, in a posture ready to step forward and start a fight at any time. Anjuin glanced around and understood the situation. The couple should be Sample's parents, and the person behind him should be Sample's uncle. He had heard Charles say before that the guy was a Death Eater, but he had no evidence to prove it, and the Ministry of Magic couldn't blatantly arrest him. He didn't expect that he would dare to run to the International Cross Station to wander around. Sample, who had been staring at Anjuin, took the initiative to approach his uncle and whispered something in his ear, and then the gloomy Traverse turned his gaze to Anjuin and kept looking him up and down. Seeing the guy who was suspected of being a Death Eater looking at him, Anjuin couldn't help but sneer, squinting his eyes to carefully look at the man. Before long, the Aurors came to maintain order, forcibly pulling the people on both sides apart. They experienced this kind of scene almost every year. Although the McKinnon family had their colleagues, it was not easy for them to explain if they directly started fighting in public. Anjuin didn't get close to them. After observing them from a certain distance, he turned around and walked onto the train. It was not wise to start a conflict in advance. After finding an empty carriage to sit down, the crowd confronting each other on the platform was also dispersed by the Aurors. Before long, Charles also walked into the carriage. "Did you see it just now, those arrogant guys? They must be the murderers who killed my aunt," Charles said to Anjuin resentfully as soon as he sat down. Seeing Charles coming in, Anjuin took out his wand and cast a shielding charm on the carriage, and then said to Charles, "I saw it. From their expressions I can basically conclude that they have no psychological burden for their evil deeds." After that, Charles said excitedly, "I will not let them go. Sample is not a good seed either. When I get to Hogwarts, I will make him look good. Will you help me, Anjuin?" Anjuin looked at Charles with bloodshot eyes, and said calmly, "I think what you should do is protect yourself first. Sample doesn't look like a peaceful guy either. Rashly acting will only make you suffer. Then you just let me watch those guys get away with it." Charles gesticulated excitedly, shouting at Anjuin. Anjuin took out a bottle of tranquilizer and handed it to Charles, then said, "Drink this first. You are not in a good state now. Let me give you an example. For example, when you get to Hogwarts, that Sample runs up to provoke you, saying he wants to duel with you. What should you do? Then I will let him taste the new curse I learned." Charles waved his wand fiercely and said, then took a sip of the potion Anjuin handed him. Anjuin looked at Charles speechlessly. "You are really a straightforward genius. If that's the case, you'll be fooled. He'll lead you to a dark corner, and then call a group of people to beat you up. You don't think he'll really duel with you fairly, do you?" Anjuin said coldly. "Then what do you say I should do? Can't I just watch? I'm not convinced." Charles stabilized his emotions a little after drinking the tranquilizer. His words were not so, but he was still very angry. "What you should do is only one thing, that is to become stronger. The pure blood faction of Slytherin is very united. Before you are sure to solve those senior students, rashly jumping in front of them is not a good idea," Anjuin advised Charles. "But I'm only 12 years old. By the way, you should be very strong, Anjuin. I heard my aunt say before that you helped them resist the Death Eaters. Do you have any way?" The reason why Charles trusts Anjuin so much is mainly because he knows that although Anjuin is a Slytherin, Anjuin's behavior proves that he is not on the same path as the Death Eaters. Anjuin looked at Charles helplessly and said, "How about this? Do you know Hagrid's hut? It's after passing the school-covered bridge, turn left at the Ring of Stones, and go to the end." Isn't that leading to the Forbidden Forest? That's a forbidden area of the school, right? Charles asked in confusion. I usually stay there, you can come to me after school every day, I will help you train. Sometimes, forbearance is not because of weakness, but to have a greater chance of winning when you strike. Anjuin explained to Charles. Affected by the potion, Charles's emotions gradually stabilized. After thinking about it, he nodded seriously. Soon, the door of the carriage was opened again. Vivian walked in, as if nothing could interfere with her good mood, smiling and greeting the two people in the carriage. Charles also greeted Vivian, said goodbye to Anjuin, and then walked out of the carriage to find his Gryffindor companions. What were you talking about just now, so mysteriously? Vivian asked while putting down her luggage. It's nothing, he said he likes you, and doesn't know whether to confess to you. Anjuin teased Vivian jokingly. Hearing Anjuin's words, Vivian's small face turned red all of a sudden, and said, What are you boys thinking about, are you sick? Listening to Vivian's incoherent words, this guy wouldn't take it seriously, would he? Never mind, anyway, I will deny it if Charles asks about it. Chapter 84. Anjuin had no idea what Vivian had misunderstood from his joke. Anyway, all the way on the train, Vivian kept asking Anjuin about Charles. After a long journey, the train finally arrived at Hogwarts. They were no longer first years and didn't need to take a boat to enter the school. After getting off the train, they walked in another direction, where carriages were waiting for them. I told you, I was just kidding. Charles didn't confess to you. I was just teasing you. Anjuin felt like he was going crazy. Vivian had been subtly talking about Charles all the way, and now no matter how he explained, she wouldn't believe him. Humph, you're still lying to me. You must be giving Charles some bad ideas. Don't think I don't know. Otherwise, why would he turn around and run as soon as he saw me? You tell him, if he has anything to say, he can tell me himself. He doesn't need you as a messenger. Vivian was now completely lost in her own fantasies. In her imagination, Charles was a timid guy who didn't even dare to confess. When walking towards the carriages, they ran into Charles. Vivian glared at him fiercely, making Charles feel confused, not knowing what he had done to offend this little miss again. Anjuin stared at the carriage picking people up. In front of the carriage stood a Thestral, all black and skinny. What's wrong with you? Why are you staring at the air? Get in the car. Vivian said to Anjuin in an annoyed tone. Ever since Anjuin witnessed Evan Rosier's death during the last Christmas program, he had been able to see Thestrals, this magical creature. Every time he saw this creature, he couldn't help but take a few more glances, thinking about when he could go up and touch one. Anjuin had occasionally seen some Thestrals that strayed out of the Forbidden Forest at Hagrid's place. Hagrid had also explained the characteristics of Thestrals to him. Only wizards who had witnessed death could see this creature. To others, they were invisible. There was a colony of Thestrals in the Forbidden Forest. Putting aside his curiosity about the Thestrals, Anjuin took a carriage back to Hogwarts School. In the Great Hall, he once again watched the new students begin the sorting ceremony. He always felt that the sorting hat seemed to be glancing at him, making him couldn't help but glare at the broken hat. After the sorting ceremony, Dumbledore began his speech, which was still very brief, and introduced this year's new defense against the dark arts professor to all the students. I regret to say that Professor Orville Robb, who was responsible for teaching defense against the dark arts last year, passed away due to old age after the end of the school year. It is admirable that he was able to take on teaching at such an advanced age. At the same time, I would like to introduce this year's defense against the dark arts professor, Mr. Edgar Bones. Dumbledore said in a slow tone. Ah? Did that old grandpa really die of old age last year? Anjuin had been worried about the old professor's health throughout the last school year. Every time he lectured, he trembled, as if he was about to fall in the classroom at any time. After persevering through that semester, Anjuin wanted to praise the old professor for his good health. Unexpectedly, he passed away right after the end of the term. However, Anjuin saw a familiar figure again. Wasn't that Edgar Bones, one of the founders of the Order of the Phoenix? When he was staying at Lily's house, he often heard Lily talk about this gentleman. He seemed to be an expert in charms and runes. Unexpectedly, Dumbledore invited him to Hogwarts to be a professor. Was it to strengthen Hogwarts' security? Edgar Bones, who got up to signal to everyone, also saw Anjuin. He had a good impression of this young wizard whom he had only met a few times, so he nodded slightly in his direction. Anjuin also smiled and nodded to Professor Bones. After the welcome feast, Anjuin began his reclusive academy life again. On this day, Anjuin finished the first defense against the dark arts class of the new school year. Mr. Bones's teaching level was obviously much higher than that of the old professor last year. His classes were humorous and the content he explained was very accessible, allowing students to quickly understand the content of the textbook. The students obviously liked this new professor very much, and the classroom atmosphere was very active. After the class, Professor Bones stopped Anjuin. Bones looked very rugged, with a face full of stubble that looked very masculine, but his tone was very gentle. Anjuin, I saw Lily before I came to Hogwarts. She said that you have a high talent and interest in runes and charms, is that right? Anjuin looked at Professor Bones in front of him and said modestly, you flatter me. Lily's guidance level is very high. I am indeed very interested in runes. Recently, I have been thinking about developing a new rune, but the progress is not ideal. Oh. Bones didn't know Anjuin's learning progress. Hearing that he had even started trying to combine new charms, he was immediately interested. Dumbledore invited him to Hogwarts this year mainly because Dumbledore wanted to prevent Voldemort from reaching into the school. He usually had to spend a lot of time outside the school, and the Order of the Phoenix had just experienced a major loss, so he entrusted Bones to help. Due to his fear of Voldemort's curse on the defense against the dark arts position, he did not plan to teach for the entire school year and planned to resign before the end of the term. The members of the Order of the Phoenix all knew about his coming to Hogwarts. Before he came, Lily had asked Bones to take care of Anjuin in the academy. She knew that Bones was a rune master, and if he could give Anjuin some guidance, it would definitely save Anjuin a lot of detours. Since you are so interested in charms, come find me when you have time. Although my level is also very average, I have been researching charms for more than 10 years after all. I believe it won't disappoint you. How about starting tonight? Bones said very modestly. Anjuin was overjoyed when he heard this, knowing that Bones was giving him special attention under Lily's care, and he quickly agreed. He didn't expect to have a surprise at the beginning of the new school year. That night, Anjuin, who had just finished dinner, knocked on the door of Bones's office with great interest. Bones, who opened the door, looked at Anjuin and smiled, you came very early. Sorry, I haven't finished my dinner yet. You may have to wait for me for a while. Only then did Anjuin say embarrassedly, sorry, Professor Bones, I was just thinking about learning runes and didn't pay attention to the time. Bones didn't take it seriously and led Anjuin into the office. On Bones's desk was a tray with only half of the food eaten. Chapter 85. Bones asked Anjuin to sit down for a while before continuing with his dinner. 6-9. After Anjuin found a seat, he began to examine the office's decor. With just one glance, he noticed a fully equipped runic workbench, which appeared more advanced than the one at Lily's house. There were 3 rows of crystal balls for testing alone. Bones noticed Anjuin staring at his runic workbench, as if he recognized it. He was a bit surprised, as this was equipment usually purchased only by scholars specializing in rune studies, and a set could cost thousands of galleons. Do you recognize that workbench? Bones asked. Yes, I stayed at Lily's house last Christmas, and they also have a runic workbench there. That's where I started learning ancient runes. Yours looks even more advanced than Lily's, Anjuin said truthfully. I see. It seems your progress is faster than I imagined. So, how are you learning runes now? Bones asked curiously. Right now, I'm using this. Anjuin took out the runic panel from his moleskin pouch. He always kept this valuable item safe with him after using it. In fact, he carried basically his entire fortune with him every day. Oh. Bones raised his eyebrows, not expecting Anjuin to have this. Although it wasn't as valuable as a workbench, it wasn't something you could buy just anywhere. A runic panel could cost several hundred galleons. James and Lily gave it to me, along with a magical book containing runes. I've basically learned all the runes in it, and now I'm mainly studying planar runes, as well as trying to disassemble and combine runes, Anjuin said with a smile. Bones couldn't help but raise his evaluation of Anjuin once again. This child was only in his 2nd year. Usually, ancient runes weren't studied until the 3rd year, but Anjuin had already mastered so much knowledge before the 3rd year? That shouldn't be possible, as there were many rigid requirements for learning and applying runes. Bones pondered, certain guesses forming in his mind. He hastily finished his dinner, wiped his mouth haphazardly, and walked over to Anjuan. Anjuan, try to catch this. As Bones spoke, he opened his right hand, and a small, glowing ball appeared from his palm. With a gentle push, the small ball of light floated towards Anjuan. Upon seeing this, Anjuan mobilized the magic within his body and reached out to grab it. The small ball of light was firmly grasped in his hand. Anjuan could sense that the ball of light had no temperature, but the magic contained within was much stronger than a normal lumos, though its brightness wasn't as bright as lumos. Therefore, Anjuan couldn't help but exclaim, "Hey!" Seeing Anjuan easily control the ball of light, Bones was greatly shocked. Hearing Anjuan say "Hey," he asked, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong with it?" "Yes, when I sensed this ball of light, I found that it contained a lot of magic, but the brightness is lower than a normal lumos," Anjuan said honestly. "You can sense the magic contained in a spell?" Bones asked with some disbelief. Immediately afterward, Bones lit up another ball of light, which was much brighter than the previous one, and asked, "Feel this one?" Anjuan followed his instructions, reached out, and grasped the ball of light. After carefully sensing it, he exclaimed in surprise, "This ball of light has a lower magic content than the previous one, but it's very bright. How is this done? How is this done? I want to ask you, how can you sense external magic so easily? It's basically impossible for anyone at this age to do that." Bones' expression remained calm, but a huge wave surged in his heart. He wondered, could this child not be human? Is he some other humanoid creature? Anjuan didn't know that he had been labeled as not human again. He just found this magic using technique very interesting. He kept juggling the balls of light in his hands and tried to invade the interior of the balls of light with his magic. Soon, the brighter ball of light became unstable after being affected by external magic. It flickered for a moment before popping and extinguishing. The dimmer one lasted for a while before slowly fading. So this technique can increase stability? Less magic but high brightness, short duration, and poor stability. More magic but low brightness, long duration, and strong stability, Anjuan summarized in his mind. Bones watched Anjuan use his superb magic control to ravage the two balls of light he had created. Although he couldn't quite believe it, this little wizard's talent was much more exaggerated than Lily had said. "Anjuan, come and sit down, let's talk." Bones pointed to the table in front of his desk. After Bones waited for both of them to sit down, he said softly, "Do you know why I had you catch those two balls of light just now?" Anjuan thought for a moment and replied, "You wanted to test my understanding of runes and magic, right? One ball of light injected more magic while reducing power consumption, which is to say, reducing brightness, but the stability is much stronger. The other is the opposite." Bones was speechless. How could it be so complicated? "Are you thinking too much?" So he said to Anjuan, "No, I just wanted to see if you could catch the ball of light. Only those with strong control over their own magic can easily hold the ball of light. Most underage wizards either crush the ball of light directly or can't catch it at all. I only readjusted the magic ratio and rune structure of the other one when you said you could sense the magic in it, so you could sense it. I didn't expect you to really be able to sense external magic." Only then did Anjuan realize something was wrong and said, "Is there something abnormal about my performance?" "That's too abnormal," Bones thought to himself, explaining, "Yes, I heard Professor Flitwick say that you joined his Charms Club. You should have heard that underage wizards have very poor magic stability and are not easy to control, right?" Only then did Anjuan remember his conversation with Professor Flitwick last year. It seemed like there was such a statement, so he nodded to Bones. Bones also nodded and said, "That's right. Generally speaking, learning runes and spells requires strong magic control, because runes, especially experimental application runes, are very precise work. If the control is slightly poor, accidents can easily occur. And many young wizards have difficulty fully controlling their magic when they are young due to physiological problems. Therefore, ancient runes are only offered as an elective course after the third year, because on the one hand, this course is very difficult, and on the other hand, underage wizards after the third year will have stronger control over their own magic. If a young wizard wants to try to study and research runes in depth, it is easier to get started than lower grade wizards." Chapter 86. "I see," Anjuan nodded. "So that's why you tested my magic control?" Bones nodded. "Indeed. Your magic control is excellent, surpassing even students in higher years. What's even rarer is your magical perception. Have you heard of the term magical sensitivity? Anjuin nodded. Professor Flitwick explained it to me. My magical sensitivity is the result of extensive training. That's why Professor Flitwick invited me to join his charms club. Bones nodded in realization. It seemed he was right. Magical sensitivity directly affects the ability to control and perceive magic. No wonder this young wizard has such exaggerated perception. Immediately afterwards, a question arose in his mind. Can sensitivity be trained? Bones planned to ask Professor Flitwick when he had time, but at this moment, he brought the topic back on track and said, since you know, and your abilities in this area are so strong, you can even try silent or wandless casting. These are techniques that can only be mastered with high sensitivity. As soon as Anjuin heard Professor Bones mention silent and wandless casting, he pointed at the ink bottle in front of them, and the ink bottle slowly floated up. Bones almost choked on his words, and was also surprised that Anjuin could already skillfully perform silent and wandless magic. He couldn't help but feel excited. Wizards with silent casting experience are good seedlings for learning rune studies. It seems you've mastered more than I thought. Okay, I basically understand your situation now, Bones said, taking out 2 books from his drawer. These 2 books should be of great help to you. Anjuin took them and saw that one of them was 49 rune disassembly and combination formulas, a very thick book. It would probably take a long time just to read it all once. The other was Aggregated Rune Logi, also a book of exaggerated thickness. Thank you, Professor, Anjuin happily accepted the 2 books. These 2 books alone made the trip worthwhile. At your current level, many books explaining theoretical content can no longer help you. What you need more are practical guidebooks. Bones paused, then continued, before we officially begin, I want to know, do you have your own research direction in studying runes? Is it towards spells or towards alchemy? Anjuin tilted his head and thought for a moment, then said, is there a difference? Bones smiled slightly and said, the 2 research directions are actually similar, but there are still some differences. If you focus on spells, it involves the development, optimization, restoration, disassembly, translation, and casting of runes. This involves many complex academic contents, and requires research on magical phonology. Of course, you have experience in silent and wandless casting, so you can skip this part, but if you want to pass on newly developed or optimized old spells, then the translation of the spell is essential. Like me, my previous research direction was disassembly, restoration, and optimization. I don't have much experience in developing new spells, but I do have some experience in optimizing spells or disassembling unfamiliar runes and identifying the magic words inside. Anjuin nodded, remembering that Lily had once said that Mr. Bones seemed to have disassembled and restored an ancient magic word. Then Bones said, if you want to try the alchemy direction, I also have some experience, but alchemy doesn't involve rune translation much. What's needed more is rune development, optimization, enchantment, inscription technology, materials science, and so on. You also need to be good with your hands. Among them, steady hands, a sense of space, and patience are the 3 most important qualities that alchemists value. A strong sense of space. Anjuin could understand the others, but what did a sense of space mean? Many runes need to be inscribed inside magical materials, and many materials are not completely flat. Any bending or deformation of the material may cause errors in the runes. If it only fails, that's okay, but many alchemists have been blown to death when experimenting with alchemical items due to errors in rune inscriptions, Bones explained. I see, so it requires 3-dimensional imagination, Anjuin nodded knowingly, then said, I am very interested in alchemy, but I also have a lot of ideas about the development and optimization of spells. Recently, I have been studying a topic in the Charms Club. I plan to develop a sonic spell. Bones nodded upon hearing this and said, the combination of runes is ever-changing. Whether it's spells or alchemy, development and optimization are the most important aspects. Let's start here. Then Bones led Anjuin to the rune platform in the office and said, you have already mastered a lot of theoretical knowledge. Let's start directly with practice. First, show me the sonic runes you are currently researching and tell me your thoughts. Yes. Anjuin skillfully operated the rune platform, and Bones next to him nodded frequently. It seemed that he usually spent a lot of time on this. My idea is to research an echolocation spell. I'm temporarily calling this spell that. The inspiration comes from bats. When bats fly, they emit a scream, which is an ultrasonic signal. Its audio frequency is very high, and humans cannot hear it. If these ultrasonic signals encounter other objects on the flight path, they will immediately reflect back, and then realize the positioning of the object. Bones was stunned after hearing Anjuan's thoughts, because he didn't understand what it meant at all. Anjuan didn't observe Bones' expression and asked his question. The base magic word I use is the control magic word, and I found that the bottom magic words of all sound-based runes are the control magic word. Why is that? Bones understood this question and explained to Anjuan, in fact, it's not just sonic magic words. Basically, most ordinary spells use control as the base magic word, such as the levitation charm, the obstacle charm, and so on. This magic word has the meaning of mastering, controlling, and guiding. Other spells that change the actual shape of objects, such as the shrinking charm and the enlargement charm, as well as transfiguration spells, all use the change magic word as the base, which has the meaning of deformation, alteration, and transformation. Chapter 87. For example, many spells that require releasing elements, such as Aguamenti and Incendio, use the element rune as their base. If you want the spell to have a certain effect, you can combine these base runes with other runes. Read more. I see. So, spells that don't change the shape of an object basically use control, those that change shape use transformation, and elemental spells use element, right? Are there any other types? Anjuan asked curiously. Of course, there are. Many memory charms use the mind rune, while many dark spells, like the unforgivable curses, use the soul rune. Soul-related magic is very complex and profound, making it difficult to develop counter spells and jinxes, which is one of the reasons why these spells are forbidden, Bones explained in detail. After resolving his doubts, Anjuan continued to explain his idea to Professor Bones. After using control as the base, I considered that the spell needs to emit sound waves first, then retrieve them, and try to achieve a positioning effect by receiving the time interval and direction of the sound waves. So, I combined the sound, emission, sense, and presentation runes. Oh? Then show me the rune combination you envisioned. Hearing that Anjuan already had enough practical ideas, Bones wanted to see how far he had progressed by observing the rune combination. Okay, Professor. Anjuan skillfully summoned the required runes and combined them according to the previous progress. Professor Bones's rune platform contained a large number of runes, so there was no situation where any characters were missing during the combination. Looking at the combined runes, Bones smiled at Anjuan and said, "Have you tried this spell? Your magical control is very good, you should have tried it, right? What's the effect?" Anjuan nodded and said, "I did try it, but after casting the spell, the rune just hummed, and it was useless except for being noisy, and I didn't receive any echo feedback. What do you think is the reason?" Bones said, "My rune wants to simulate ultrasound, which requires higher frequency sound waves. I think it should be because the sound wave frequency is not enough," Anjuan said his thoughts. "I think I understand what you mean, but there is one thing you got wrong with this rune," Bones said, observing Anjuan's rune. "What is it?" Anjuan's heart moved. As expected, professionals are different. "Here," Bones said, pointing to a spot on Anjuan's rune. "Is there a problem with the presentation rune?" Anjuan asked, puzzled. Bones nodded and said, "That's right. Your idea is to emit high-frequency sound waves and then receive them, and then detect the surrounding environment for you, is that right? How far can you imagine the range?" Anjuan thought for a while and said, "The speed of ultrasound is very fast and the stability is strong. At least it should be able to sense a radius of 100 meters. If it is optimized by runes, plus some casting skills, it should be no problem to detect the situation within a kilometer." Such a wide range? Bones was secretly surprised. Although he didn't know what Anjuan was talking about ultrasound, if he could really develop such a large-scale reconnaissance spell, the application prospects would be very broad. As a sensing magic, his level of supersensory charm can only sense a range of about tens of meters. Bones nodded secretly in his heart, and then said to Anjuan, "Okay, then have you ever thought about how to present it after receiving such a large detection range, with your ears, or with your eyes? If it is attached to the eyes, it may interfere with the original vision." When Anjuan heard this, he couldn't help but be stunned. Indeed, he thought it was good. Where should the return sound waves be transmitted after receiving them? Ears are definitely not good, eyes are okay, but if the eyes are full of sound wave patterns, it will even interfere with normal vision. During the rune test, what if he accidentally blinded himself? Moreover, in Anjuan's vision, this kind of echo positioning is a 360-degree blind spot detection mode, and the eyes can only see one direction. Bones looked at Anjuan, who was thinking, and explained to him, "Actually, your idea is very good, this kind of spell has good application prospects, its biggest role should be to detect the situation behind obstacles, or in environments with poor visibility, such as forests, right?" Anjuan nodded and said, "That's right, and in my vision, I can also observe people who use the disillusionment charm or wear an invisibility cloak." Oh! Bones didn't expect this, but this added to the value of the rune, so he continued to explain, "I will give you two ideas. The first is to transmit the feedback to your mind, so that you can directly present the environment within the scope of the spell in your mind. I remember that there are similar applications in the Legilimency rune, but the development difficulty is very high and the risk of experimentation is also very high, so I don't recommend you to do this. The second is to change your thinking and disassemble your runes. You can try to use alchemy props to receive and present information, such as a mirror or a pair of glasses. The spell emits, that ultrasound, and then the alchemy props receive it, so it is safe and the development difficulty of the spell is low." "I understand, then I am willing to accept the second method," Anjuan thought for a while and replied. Sure enough, experienced scholars have clear ideas, Anjuan thought silently. "Okay, let's stop here today. To do what I said, you still need to learn a lot, including material science and enchantment. Next, I will explain these contents to you." After coming out of Professor Bones's office, it was past curfew. Anjuan thought for a while and decided to go back to the Slytherin dormitory to rest today. While walking towards the basement, Anjuan recalled today's gains. Professor Bones is indeed a master of runes. The amount of information gained today is richer than what he has learned on his own. Just as he was walking and thinking, when he came to the third floor, Anjuan suddenly heard a rustling sound behind him. As soon as he turned his head, he saw two dark shadows hitting him. Instinctively casting a barrier to bounce the two shadows away, he saw that the shadows exploded immediately after hitting the obstacle, and a stench came over his face. Dung bombs. Anjuan constantly mobilized the air around him to blow away the filth and stench, and then quickly hid behind the stone pillar next to him, looking for the figure of the attacker, but the attacker had already run away. "Attacking me as soon as school starts, who could it be? It's probably Traverse and his gang, using dung bombs? How childish," Anjuan thought with a frown. Chapter 88. "You haven't even prepared to attack me, yet you come to provoke me first? Do you really think I'm easy to bully?" While Anjuan was pondering, a sound came from the other direction. "Reading. Who's messing around again? You can't escape, you little rascal." It was Filch's voice. Anjuan saw that one side was blocked by the dung bomb stains, and the other side was blocked by Filch. After thinking for a moment, he decisively flipped over the stone railing of the corridor and jumped downstairs. Then, by constantly creating barriers under his feet as stepping stones, he quickly moved to the corridor downstairs. "It seems they know Filch is on the other side and want to trap me in the center of the corridor, forcing me to either be caught by Filch or wade through the dung bomb stains to escape. So they are likely still hiding on the other side, planning to ambush me when I run in their direction." Anjuan quickly analyzed the situation based on the information he had gathered. He wasn't the type to run away with his tail between his legs after being attacked. Now that he knew the possible location of the attackers, he would circle back and deal with them. At the other end of the third-floor corridor, which was covered in dung bomb stains, Traverse and 3 other second-year Slytherin students were indeed lying in wait. If Anjuan ran in this direction to avoid Filch, he would pass through the area where they were ambushing. As luck would have it, Traverse was passing by the trophy room on the 4th floor with Rosier and 2 other pure-blood classmates when he happened to see Anjuan's figure, deep in thought. Traverse had been wanting to get revenge on Anjuan, but Anjuan was always elusive, never around in the common room. Today, it was truly a case of enemies meeting on a narrow road. At the same time, he saw Filch about to patrol the 3rd floor, so he came up with this sudden attack. "All right, that guy must have been caught by Filch. Let's run quickly, or we'll get caught too," Rosier said nervously, looking around, trying to persuade Traverse. Initially, when Rosier heard that Traverse was planning to ambush Anjuan, he advised him not to do it. But Traverse acted confidently, stubbornly taking out the dung bombs he had and attacking. As a result, the guy blocked it without even taking out his wand. Now he's still thinking about ambushing around the corner. Rosier felt that they were in for a bad time. What are you afraid of? Let's wait a little longer. Although that guy wasn't hit by the dung bombs, Filch has blocked that end. If he wants to run, he has to run in our direction. He might be hiding in the classroom next to the corridor right now. When Filch chases him out, we'll all attack together and teach that mudblood a lesson, Traverse said with a sneer, whispering instructions to the others. However, they waited for a while and still didn't see Anjuin pass by. The angry shouts of Filch kept coming from the other side, indicating that he had searched the nearby classrooms and was about to come in this direction. Could that guy have really disappeared into thin air? He couldn't have jumped out of the corridor, could he? As Filch's voice grew closer and closer, Rosier and the two other students kept urging Traverse to retreat. Reluctantly, he had no choice but to retreat. Let's go, we'll find another chance to deal with him next time. We'll retreat from here, Traverse cursed unwillingly, leading the others away in the opposite direction. There was a tower staircase on the other side that could lead downstairs. Just as they were walking down the stairs on the other side to the second floor, Traverse heard a few ouch sounds, and then the two companions beside him fell heavily to the ground. Before he could see what was happening, a swift curse flew out from the shadows in the corner, hitting him hard. Instantly, Traverse was knocked away, crashing into the wall next to him, and falling heavily again. After landing, Traverse was completely unconscious. Rosier was so frightened by the scene that his legs went weak and he sat down on the ground. Then he saw a figure walking out of the shadows, and it was Anjuin. As soon as Rosier saw Anjuin, he immediately cowered and shouted to him, "No, no, it wasn't me. It was all Traverse's doing. I advised him, but it was no use." Seeing Rosier so cowardly, Anjuin felt bored. He smiled slightly and walked forward, searching the bodies of the three unconscious people. He quickly found a few money pouches, counted the amount, and there were more than 30 galleons, which was a good harvest. "Don't be nervous, Rosier. You brought them here to give me money. I'm so happy, I even have to thank you. Look, your 3 months of protection fees are covered, aren't they?" Anjuin said to Rosier with a smile. Rosier's face immediately turned bitter. "How did it seem like I was the one who lured these guys over?" Anjuin came to Rosier's side, grabbed him up, and gently patted the dust off him, saying, "All right, I know you don't have the guts to mess with me, but there are conditions to not being targeted by me. This money is part of it." Anjuin shook the money pouch in his hand, and then continued, "Has your family made any moves recently? And Traverse, have you heard anything about him?" No, my family has been considering changing their attitude since Evan died. Now their position is leaning towards the neutral faction. Self-preservation is the top priority now, but they don't dare to openly defy the Dark Lord. Traverse has been getting close to Quirk Wilkes, a fourth-year student, recently. "I don't know anything else," Rosier said to Anjuin incoherently. "Very good. I'll let you off this time. Just say you escaped from my hands when you get back." Anjuin smiled coldly, ignored Rosier, and left directly. "Even if I hide every day, trouble keeps coming my way. As expected, class conflicts are basically unsolvable. It seems I need to speed up the progress." After thinking about it, Anjuin quickly returned to the Slytherin dormitory. He didn't care what happened to those guys lying there. The next day, Anjuin heard from Vivian about what happened last night. Rosier was really cowardly. He didn't even dare to run and could only lie on the ground pretending to be dead. Then the 4 of them were caught by Filch. Filch directly blamed them for throwing dung bombs. It was said that the few were woken up last night and were forced by Filch to clean up the stains until midnight, and they were also given a month of detention. Recently, the conflicts in the magical world have become increasingly fierce, causing the Slytherin purebloods in the school to start gathering people to take sides. Although Vanessa is already the head girl, she still can't suppress those guys. Now, in Slytherin, students who choose not to take sides are also being targeted. In the past few days, Anjuin has already felt many people looking at him with malicious eyes. Chapter 89. After all, I'm a Muggle-born wizard who was sorted into Slytherin, so it's natural that I'd easily come into the sights of those who uphold the pure blood supremacy ideology. Read. However, after a year of closed-door cultivation, Anjuin wasn't too afraid, but he still needed to add some trump cards. After pondering for a long time, Anjuin made a decision, simply moving to the Forbidden Forest cottage, which would reduce the chance of conflict with those pure blood factions. After moving out of the dormitory, Anjuin continued to practice spells every day, study rune knowledge, and then go to Professor Bone's place in the evening to study charms. This day, Anjuin was in his small room reading Aggregate Rune Logi. This book introduced a lot of knowledge about optimizing runes by adjusting the structure of runes, and Anjuin also found a way to increase and decrease sound wave frequencies. But just as Anjuin was reading with relish, his door was knocked. Opening the door of the cottage, he found Charles standing at the door. Anjuin smiled and said, "You're here, it seems your reason has overcome your impulsiveness." Charles was led into the room by Anjuin, looked at the furnishings in the cottage, and asked curiously, "You live here now?" "That's right. The internal situation in Slytherin is not peaceful now, all the students are being forced to choose sides by those pure-blood factions, but they will definitely not let me go. Rather than continue living in the dormitory and giving them a chance to find fault, it's better to jump out and accumulate strength," Anjuin said with a smile. Charles said angrily, "I didn't expect those bastards to not even spare their own academy's classmates. What about Vivian? She also hates those guys, right? She comes from a large family. Although she is a half-blood, it's not enough for her to be treated like that, and Senior Vanessa will protect those girls," Anjuin said. Charles nodded and said, "That's good. I've been thinking about it, and I feel that I'm still too weak. Recently, some conflicts have occurred again between our academy and Slytherin, but I can't help it all. You have more ideas, and I'm willing to listen to you. Tell me, what should I do?" Anjuin took out a piece of paper from his desk drawer and said to Charles, "I have already planned a training program for you. For the next period of time, you will have to undergo special training." Charles took the parchment and looked at it, then frowned and asked, "Running? What kind of special training is this? Even if you want to train, shouldn't you be practicing spells?" Anjuin patted Charles's slightly thin body and said, "Your physique is not strong enough, which will affect your reaction ability. Strengthening your physical fitness can also activate the magic in your body, so the effect of practicing spells will be better. At the same time, continuous exercise can strengthen your will, and a firm will can increase the intensity of magic. These are all what I have summarized over the years." Then, without waiting for Charles to say anything, he continued, "You must get up early every morning, and I will take you running to train your physical fitness. After class, you come to me to start endurance training and spell practice for magic. You have to be mentally prepared, this is not easy." Charles shook his head and said, "I'm not afraid of hardship. As long as I can become stronger, I can persevere." Anjuin looked at Charles's determined look and nodded. As one of the few peers and friends, Anjuin naturally supported the idea of being motivated, but it still depends on whether there is enough determination. "Okay, now we will start magic extension training. This is a training method I developed myself, which can strengthen your control and perception of magic," Anjuin said. Then Anjuin took a large basin of water, controlled the basin to fly over Charles's head, and said to Charles, "Now cast a spell on it, use the levitation charm." Charles had never heard of the training method that Anjuin said, but he did as he was told, but he couldn't cast spells silently and wandlessly like Anjuin, so he had to take out his wand and cast the spell. "Okay, what you have to do next is to maintain the current state of spell casting, and then persevere for as long as possible, trying to feel the flow of magic in your body, and try to save magic power as much as possible," Anjuin said to Charles about the training points. "Then what?" Charles stared nervously at the large basin above his head. He had used too much force at the beginning, and he had never cast a spell on such a heavy object. Then just wait. I'll see how your magic storage is first. Hold on, continuous spell casting can help you improve your control over magic." Anjuin leisurely took a chair and sat next to Charles, continuing to flip through the book. Charles persisted for 5 or 6 minutes, and then felt sore all over, and his neck, which had been raised all the time, became stiff. He asked Anjuin nervously, "Is this really effective? I feel like I can't hold on anymore. It's only been a few minutes? When I was 7 or 8 years old, I persisted longer than you. Stop dawdling and hold on. The longer you persist, the better the effect," Anjuin said lightly with a frown. Without trying systematic training, it often takes a period of adaptation time, just like long-distance running. When you start training, you always rush too fast and too hard, and as a result, you run out of breath before you even run halfway. Even if the original physical strength is enough to complete the long-distance running, you can't persist to the end. Charles's situation is like this now. The wizarding world has never had a precedent for systematic training. Basically, they only value the result, not the process. Ability and achievement all depend on talent and self-consciousness, and may even be attributed to bloodlines by pure blood families. Anjuin has always looked down on this, and he plans to personally train Charles into a wizard who far exceeds his peers and use facts to verify that effort is more important than bloodlines. Since this is the case, don't blame me for being cruel, Anjuin thought silently as he looked at Charles, who was struggling to persevere. Continue, hold on. If you can't even complete this small training, how can you avenge your relatives? Anjuin said coldly. When Charles heard Anjuin's words, he suddenly became anxious and kept gritting his teeth and persisting. You have to maintain it for at least 10 minutes, Anjuin reminded again. Okay. Charles said fiercely. Time passed by every minute and every second, and Charles had persisted for more than 10 minutes, but Anjuin had not reminded Charles, he was preparing to squeeze Charles's potential as much as possible. Not yet. I feel like my magic power has been drained. Because he used a little too much force at the beginning, Charles now feels a little weak. There's one last minute, hold on. In fact, the time has reached 11 minutes, and the magic power currently output by Charles is basically equal to all the magic power of wizards of his age. After another while, Charles already felt a little dizzy, so he could only ask again, not yet? It seems like it's been a while. Chapter 90. After a while, Charles was feeling a little dizzy and lightheaded, and could only ask again, is it done yet? It feels like it's been a while. 30 seconds left. I've been watching the time. Don't give up at the crucial moment. It had been 13 minutes, and Charles looked like he was at his limit. Charles persevered for almost another minute, but couldn't hold on any longer, and was swaying unsteadily. At this moment, Anjuin was still encouraging him, last 10 seconds, keep going. Hearing this, Charles squeezed out the last bit of magic in his body and persevered, counting down 10 seconds in his mind. Finally, he couldn't hold on any longer, his body went limp, and he was about to fall to the ground, the basin of water on his head about to fall off, and Charles was about to become a drowned rat. At this moment, Anjuin gently waved his hand, and the basin of water on his head was steadily controlled. Charles, who was about to fall, was also supported by Anjuin. Okay, sit down for a while and have some water. Anjuin helped Charles to sit on the chair next to him and handed him a full glass of water. Charles felt limp all over. Since entering school, he had never experienced the feeling of running out of magic. Now, he didn't even have the strength to hold his wand. He gulped down a whole glass of water, heaved a sigh of relief, and felt like he was alive again, but his body still had no strength. Okay, now is also very critical. Experience the state of your body at this time. I'll get you something to eat. After your magic is exhausted, replenish your strength, and your body will replenish your strength and magic, and gradually increase your magic reserves, Anjuin instructed. Charles nodded, experiencing the state of his body, which was like a balloon being drained of air. His whole body was soft and uncomfortable, but now he could gradually feel that his body was gradually secreting something for him, which should be magic. A water pipe filled with water, you will feel that it is a hole, and you can't distinguish the difference between water and the pipe, and an empty water pipe, gradually filling it with water, you can clearly feel the existence of water flow. Charles is now in this feeling, he can gradually perceive the existence of magic, which can also constantly exercise his magic perception, that is, magic sensitivity. If Anjuin can controllably improve Charles's magic sensitivity, then the topic related to magic sensitivity in the Charms Club will gain the first precious experimental data. Maybe that topic, in the beginning, Professor Flitwick hinted that he should conduct research and experiments in this area. Professor Flitwick must be looking forward to him finding a way to improve magic sensitivity. Maybe this training for Charles can also break through this topic by the way. Anjuin brought out a blueberry pie that he had made earlier from Hagrid's kitchen, handed it to Charles, and asked, "How is it? Do you feel anything different?" Charles took the pie and ate it in big mouthfuls. He was exhausted just now. While chewing the blueberry pie in his mouth, he said, "It seems to be really useful. I can feel the magic slowly secreting in my body." Secretion? That's a good word. Remember that feeling, you'll feel it often in the future, Anjuin teased with a smile. Charles swallowed, the feeling of exhausting all the magic in his body was too uncomfortable, and couldn't help asking, "Do you also do this kind of exercise?" I started this kind of training when I was 7 years old, and I still insist on it before going to bed. To be honest, the effect will be better at the beginning. After getting used to it, I can basically know where my limit is, Anjuan said. What? Started at the age of 7? My God, how did you persevere through this painful experience? Charles looked at Anjuan in stunned silence. Anjuan said indifferently, if you want to get something, you have to pay something, right? Then Anjuan let Charles rest in the cabin for a while and had dinner with Hagrid. Hagrid also liked Charles, a Gryffindor student, very much, while Charles praised Anjuan's cooking skills. After dinner, Anjuan accompanied Charles back to the castle, and Anjuan had to go to Professor Bones to learn spells. Today I'll introduce you to some alchemy materials, come and take a look. Professor Bones spread various materials on the large table in the middle of the office, roughly divided into wood, metal, and leather. Anjuan looked at the dazzling array of materials on the table, touching them one by one, feeling the texture of different materials. Suddenly, he found a material that looked and felt very familiar, very similar to the amulet that Lily gave him. Bones smiled when he saw Anjuan repeatedly examining a piece of copper material and said, since you're so curious about this, let's start with metal materials first. The material in your hand is called Paracelsus bronze, invented by the legendary alchemist Paracelsus, a very popular alchemical metal. Generally, beginners use this material to practice. It has stable properties, decent energy storage, and the cost is not too high, Bones introduced to Anjuan. So this is a material for beginners to practice. Lily really didn't lie to him when she said it was a casual thing when she gave him the amulet. Invented. Then Anjuan realized something. That's right, there are only so many known metals in the wizarding world and the muggle world today, and there are no natural magic metals. These metal magic materials are actually alloys. They are often made by wizards using metals as raw materials, fusing other metals, inputting magic power or adding some magical creature components during the manufacturing process to form alloys with magical properties. According to the different alloy formulas, there will be different characteristics, so many ordinary metals are not very valuable in themselves, but alloy formulas are very precious. Paracelsus bronze is an alchemical material with a public formula, so the value is not very high, Bones explained to Anjuan. That's right, if there were any special magic metals in this world, then the Muggle world would definitely be the first to discover them. Bones then picked up a silver candlestick and showed it to Anjuan. This is Ithildan, also known as fairy mithril. The alloy formula is firmly controlled by the goblins. Many goblin silverwares are made of fairy mithril. It has very good magic conduction properties and extremely strong stability. However, the disadvantage is that the texture is soft. Alchemists generally choose to make it into a magical ornament, or add some Ithildan to other alchemical metals to increase magic conductivity.